everybody. Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 549. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas, fresh off of his first M21 draft. Luis, how did it go?
It went pretty well. I took the white shrine over to the common black 5-mana removal spell, and then got paid off because I picked up 4 shrines total, 2 white, a black, and a red. And I'm excited to play this out during the latter half of the show.
Come on.
Once we get into a rhythm, you know.
All we need is your focus for this one stretch of time, and then you can go draft to your heart's content. And I know you will. All right. We've got the M21 set review rare and mythic rare version for you lined up today. We're going to go over every single rare and mythic rare in the set and give you a grade on them, give you our thoughts on them, so that you know if you've opened up a sweet bomb that you just have to put in your deck, or if you've opened up a bit of a stinker that maybe you should avoid. Sometimes with rares, it can be hard to differentiate because they get so complicated. And today, we're going to be walking you through that. First things first, though, our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Coming up this week is the CFB Pro Showdown. This is the second one of these that's gone, and you can sign up for it until Friday for CFB Pro members. So if you sign up for CFB Pro, you can sign up for this. It doesn't cost anything to get into the tournament. Once you're a CFB Pro member, there is $1,000 in store credit for the total prize pool. And this is really cool. The winner gets to play against Reed Duke for a chance to double their first place prize. And it's a free roll too. So you get to play against Reed, and if you lose, you still get your first place prize. And if you topple the Reader Rabbit, then you get to double it up. So really cool. One of the many perks of being a CFB Pro member. And you can head over to Channel Fireball to check out the details on that. But that is coming up this weekend. So if you're interested, hop on to CFB Pro, and you can play that sweet tournament, and maybe look forward to more of those. Also want to thank our patrons, everybody at patreon.com/limited resources. You know, some of our most dedicated listeners there support the show via Patreon. You get some extra cool perks for it, and we certainly appreciate it. It helps keep the show going and makes it what it is. And it means a lot to us for everybody that's over there. You can scale the amount that you want. The way we have it set up is it's per show released. So that way, if there isn't a show, you're not paying. It holds us accountable. It lets you get what you want out of it, and it keeps things on the up and up. And you can choose how much you want to do per show. It's scalable to whatever you want. You can do $1 or whatever, and it's totally fine with us. So, patreon.com/limited resources for that. Luis, once again, we are jumping into a set review, which means we are going to be giving grades to cards, but we like to go over what these grades mean for people that are just tuning in.
Right. So we use letter grades. We're going to start with A. The A cards are bombs, game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and just the best cards in the set. We're talking cards like Luris, Zenith Flare, and Vivian from Ikoria. You're going to see a lot of A's today. Rares tend to cluster in the A's and the F's. There's not a whole lot of just average rares, though there are some. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. For this set, that'd be the 2-color pair. We were talking efficient cards, solid removal, cards that when you take them in the first couple picks, you're pretty happy. Cards like Parcel Beast, Archipelago, Fire Prophecy. C's are playable. The offset Pawns of Limited, they're interchangeable. You're going to play a bunch of them. You don't really feel bad or good about having them in your deck. These are cards like Migratory Greathorn, Memory Leak, Prickly Marmoset, solid to slightly above average cards. These are cards that you're unhappy to run. These are playable if you need to, but in general, when you have cards that are with the D grade in your deck, you're pretty unhappy about it. These are cards like Facet Reader, Flycatcher, Giraffid, Crustacean. Fs are cards that are basically just unplayable. These rares, again, tend to fall into this category. You have the weird, there's always some weird red, 10 mana spell and the constructed build arounds. These are cards like Titan's Nest and the Ozolith, just super narrow, expensive, or really hard to use cards. We have 2 subgrades. One, Sideboard will not be used much today. These are cards that don't make the main deck very often or ever, but are good out of the sideboard. Cards that destroy a certain type of card, like destroy an enchantment or destroy a flyer, that sort of thing. In general, rares don't tend to fall into this category. And the next one is Build-Arounds. You actually will see a fair amount of rares in here. And these are cards that on their own aren't very good or don't do anything, but can be very powerful once you have the right support. We're talking cards like Weaponize the Monsters or Snare Tactician, which, on their own don't do the thing, but in the right deck can be among the best cards in your deck. So a lot of rares do end up falling into this bucket.
Yeah, and the reason for the sideboard and build around grades are just to put a note on the fact that this is only when built around that this grade applies, because otherwise it's probably an F. So you have to make sure that you keep that in mind when you hear the grade. If we say build around, that means in the deck that it goes in, where the other ones are more, in a vacuum or just a loose color. For
example, if you want to look way back, a card like Tempered Steel that gives all your artifact creatures +2/+2, mm-hmm. Clearly that card is just bad in the average deck, but in the deck that uses it, it's an A+. It's just the best card in your deck by so much.
Yes.
But we do want to just let you know, it's kind of like a hint to say, hey, you got to put some work into this to get the reward, whereas cards like Glorybringer, any deck that has 7 mountains, Glorybringer's an A. There's you don't need to do anything else.
That's right. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to be starting with blue for our colors, but there's one non-artifact colorless card in the set, and we'll do that one first. Out of respect, let's just say, for Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, baby. That's right. Ugin's back at Mythic Rare. 8 mana Planeswalker, 7 loyalty, +2. Ugin, the Spirit Dragon deals 3 damage to any target, -X. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that's 1 or more colors, and -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is a card that we have a checkered history with, Luis.
It has received one of our all-time worst grades. I don't remember what our actual grade was. I think it was D.
Yeah.
In the Fate Reforged set review, my first set review, I think. And it turns out that we just focused too much on the 8 and not on the cost and not enough on the power level. Ugin's just a ridiculous bomb. If you cast Ugin, you win the game.
That's right.
I would say in limited, if you were able to put Ugin on the stack, you're probably above 90% to win. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to have a situation where you don't. So what you're going to want to do with Ugin is, if you're behind on board or have something more expensive than their entire board, like you have a 5-drop and they have all cards that are 4 or less, you start by minusing Ugin. And with 7 initial loyalty, you can up to -6 it and still keep Ugin around, which generally wipes the board of all of their cards. The only thing it leaves behind are artifacts. I mean, it does the same to you as well, but again, you either end up with nothing but an Ugin, or if you have the most expensive card out there, you can tailor it to that. Then you start just spamming the +2, and just casting a lightning bolt every turn while going up 2 loyalty is, first of all, incredibly hard to race, but second, they're never going to kill Ugin under that scenario.
Right.
So
9 loyalty when you pass a turn back. Come on.
And then you end up also in spots where you can play Ugin and just immediately use the +2 and not even have to use the -X. Like they have a 3/3 flyer, but the board is otherwise kind of stalled. Play Ugin, you kill their flyer. If something goes wrong, they're not killing a 9 loyalty Planeswalker anyway.
Right.
And the ultimate, it doesn't get used quite as often because drawing 7 is not always an advantage. That's actually getting to the point where you're drawing so many cards you might be concerned about decking, but it's there. And sometimes you will use it. All told, this is just a fantastic card. So part of the reason we don't like 7 and 8 mana cards is when they get answered, you tend to lose the game because you've put so many resources into not only casting this, but building a deck that can cast it. Like you don't just put Ugin in your black-red deck that has 16 or 17 lands. Let's say you first pick Ugin, I'm really looking to be green and have like Llanowar Visionaries and maybe a Cultivate if I'm lucky. I'm looking to have a lot of defensive cards and removal because you don't have to put any stock into win conditions. Ugin's your win condition. Mm-hmm. And then you cast this and then you win. A lot of 7 and 8 mana cards don't have quite this power level, and that's why we're so down on them. We look at Gloomsower, the common 7 mana 8/8, that drains them for 2 or whatever. You can really envision losing when you cast that card. A lot of cards will beat you. They can bounce it. They can kill it. It just might not be enough on board. It doesn't stop flyers, etc. Ugin really only loses to counter spells, and I guess Planeswalker removal, which there is a common Planeswalker removal spell, so that is a new thing. But for the most part, Ugin is just going to win you the game when you cast it, and as such, I think it deserves an A.
Yeah, I do too. The thing that we try to bake into these grades on these expensive cards is you can't just look at it under the scenario of when you cast this card, what happens, you also have to look at it under the scenario of what about the games where you don't get to 8 mana and don't get to cast Ugin? And this could have been, say, a decent 5-drop, something that, like pick one of the 5 drops from the common and uncommon set review that we gave a C+ to or whatever, right? If it was that card, would you have won the game instead? And there's a lot of scenarios where that actually is the case. So what that does is it pushes the bar up so high for an 8 mana card that it basically needs to say you win the game when you resolve the spell. And you know what? It does. So Ugin's going to get an 8. Awesome card. Would try to work towards it. And I really want to reiterate what Luis said about, look, try to play green to ramp it out a little bit. Try to play a control shell so that you can really try to hit those land drops. Hey, if you need to play 18 lands in a deck like this, that's okay too. You really do want to try to get to this as quickly as you can or as consistently as you can. Amazing card though.
Another note is if your opponent has Ugin, I'm boarding in counter spells and Mind Rots. The Mind Rot especially is very effective because imagine you Mind Rot them and their hand is Ugin, 2 land and a good spell, and they have like 5 lands in play. There's not really good choices there.
No.
So Mind Rot is effective. Counter spells are very effective. I'd board in cancel if I saw that my opponent had Ugin, just because you need a way to stop this thing.
That's right. And it's a great point. And
speaking of A's.
Where are we going?
Oh no, we're on blue. Never mind. I saw Baneslayer Angel. Spoiler, Baneslayer Angel gets an A.
Yeah, we'll get there soon. Let's move to blue though. This is Baron Tolarian Archmage. 1 blue for a 2/2 legendary human wizard at rare. When Baron Tolarian Archmage enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So I'm in love.
Is mostly an exclusion mage or mana war with extra steps, but there's a couple of things going on. First of all, 1 blue for a 2/2 that bounces on one of their creatures. A great card. That's just a B, already. Mm-hmm. Baron, I think, does get bumped up to a B+, and the reason is Baron draws you a card if one of your things gets bounced, which opens the door to not only Baron just playing Baron, bouncing your own creature to get to be up a card as bonus points if your creature has like a Faith's Fetters on it. That's just a blowout. And also it means opposing bounce spells get a lot worse. They have to use them on their turn. They can't use them on yours because Baron only triggers on your end step. And if you have other bounce spells in your deck, now those start becoming valuable as well as card draw. Plus, every now and then you will get to bounce a Planeswalker, though that is, of course, infrequent. So yeah, Baron, a very solid card. More of a constructed plant here in terms of like the rarity. So don't expect this to do that much more than just a mana war, but a mana war already is a very high bar. So I would give Baron a B+.
Yeah, I like B+ for Baron, and I'm just excited. I mean, this is like a mana war with extra, so I like that. Next is Discontinuity. This is 3 blue for an instant at Mythic rare. It's like right there, you're going, what is going on here? A 6 mana instant Mythic? Okay. As long as it's your turn, this spell costs 2 blue less to cast. So what does that make it?
It makes it 1
and a blue? Okay. End the turn. That's actually all of the rules text. It does say what that means, which is exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size, damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end.
So it is as if some invisible hand just went, boop, the turn has passed. Mm-hmm. All effects that would happen from a turn passing happen, and everything that's on the stack right now vanishes, never to be seen again. So this is one of those cards that like, whoa, this is powerful. But again, this is something that I think people are going to mess around with in Constructed. I don't think it's good in Limited because, first of all, the 6 mana end the turn thing is kind of hard to use to get a huge advantage. Yes, you can cast it during their upkeep, and it's like they skip their turn. They won't get to draw a card for their turn. They won't get to attack you. But it's a much worse than taking an extra turn because they untap all their creatures. There's no way to prevent them from doing that. So it's not like Time Warp where you're like, all right, attack you for 4, Time Warp, attack you for 4. It's like attack you for 4, go, upkeep, discontinuity. So you traded 1 for 1, your discontinuity for their draw step. They untapped all their stuff, and then it's your turn again. That's not a huge advantage. You didn't really get much out of that. You can use it as a counterspell on their turn. So you pass, they cast something, you discontinuity in response. Again, that's a 1-for-1 and effectively just a counterspell, though sometimes it can make them skip their attack. Imagine if they cast a spell before attacking. But they already drew their card for their turn, so you're not getting a 2-for-1 there. Mm-hmm. And then ending your own turn for only 2 mana, there's not that much that really gives you an advantage for. It means that if they cast a spell during your end step, you can use this as like a negate. Yeah. Okay, that's one thing. If a combat somehow is going really badly for you, like you attack and they block and play a trick. But again, we're really just talking about a bunch of 1-for-1s that require awkward timing or lots of mana. So discontinuity looks like an F to me. I don't see this being a very effective card to put in your deck. Super interesting card, but yeah, I have to agree with you. It looks too, even though there's a lot of edge cases, they're all really weird and narrow and they're clunky. So yeah, F for discontinuity. We'll see about it. Next is Ghostly Pilferer. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 spirit rogue at rare. Whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, draw a card. Nice. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. So that's nice, a free roll on that. And then it has the activated ability, discard a card. Ghostly Pilferer can't be blocked this turn. Yeah, the middle line of text is not super relevant and limited. It's good against companions or flashback cards. There's, I think, an exceedingly small amount of ways to draw a card from that in this set. I actually don't even know if there are. Yeah, I guess you can, if they cast Demonic Embrace out of their graveyard, you draw a card. Cool. I do like the fact that it's a good aggressive creature, a 2-mana 2/1 that in the mid game you can start chucking lands to just or useless spells to become unblockable. And then every time you do, you get the card back on your turn when you untap it and draw a card. There's a bit of a delay, so your opponent has a little more time to interact. Mm-hmm. Also, if you just play this on turn 2 and they don't have a blocker, you can immediately attack and then use it. Though at that point in the game, I don't know if you want to spend 2 mana to draw a card. Overall, this is good. Every blue deck will play it. It's going to be better in aggressive decks, but even in control decks, it's kind of like a slow speed looter. And, that's just not a bad thing to be. So I would give Ghostly Pilferer a B. Yeah, I think it's a B for Ghostly Pilferer, especially if you can find a way to tap it where you don't have to discard the card to make it unblockable. Like if you can attack into an 0/4 wall, or if you can tap it to pay a cost or do something else, that's where you can actually get ahead on cards on it. Turning it from a looter to a way to actually just draw some cards. I don't know if there's ways to do it though. I also misspoke. This was good against companions before they changed the companion rule, but it looked like the kind of card that would be good against that sort of effect. Oh, now companions actually go to your hand, so that doesn't work. Not that matters for the limited grade, but right. Yeah, so I like B on Ghostly Pilferer. Yeah, that's a good card. B for Ghostly Pilferer. Next is Pursued Whale. 5 blue for an 8/8 whale at rare. When Pursued Whale enters the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 red pirate creature token with this creature can't block, and creatures you control attack each combat if able. Spells your opponents cast that target Pursued Whale cost 3 more to cast. This is Moby Dick, right? It gives them a little Captain Ahab who has to go, is forced to attack every turn. If they don't have a removal spell, this card is, first of all, very flavorful. Second, imagine you play this and they have a 4/4 out. Next turn, they have to attack with the 1 on the 4/4. You block the 4/4. You keep their 1/1 alive, and then this just keeps happening. They're unable to play new creatures while this is in play and until they get rid of their own pirate token or your whale. Yeah. It also makes it harder for your opponent to kill it with the 3 mana extra. But you know what? That's not actually that good, because by the time you cast this, it's unlikely that the tax of 3 is really going to prevent them from casting their removal spell. It's only the 5 mana removal spells that may have an issue. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good card. If it does get dealt with, they do get a 1/1 out of the deal, but that's not even necessarily upside, because the 1/1 still is forcing them to attack every turn. It still might be bad for them. Of course, if they're playing a sacrifice deck and they immediately sacrifice the 1/1, you're going to feel a little foolish. Yeah. I like Pursued Whale. It is a 7-drop. It does carry some of that risk, and the protection ability doesn't really stop them from, I think, interacting with it at the stage of the game where this comes out. But often you'll play this and you'll just immediately pick up a card, which is pretty good. I'm thinking like B on Pursued Whale.
Yeah, I think so too. For 7 mana, it doesn't have any form of evasion, no trample or flying or anything like that. So, they're going to be able to survive it for a while. If things go according to plan for the Pursued Whale, it's excellent, right? You get to eat a creature, you get to start slamming them for 8. They're forced to do this awkward race that they don't really want to do, and it can work out well. It's just, it does fall prey to, if they kill your Pursued Whale, you gave them a free 1/1 that has an annoying thing and might mess up combat for them anyway, but it might not, if depending on how far behind you were, if they wanted to attack anyway, and you didn't really accomplish much for your game-ending bomb. So I like B for Pursued Whale. It's still powerful. I mean, it's a good card.
Yeah.
See the Truth is next. It's 1 and a blue for a sorcery. At rare, it says, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards into your hand instead.
Yeah, so it's sorcery speed anticipate, but if you flash it back or cast it with some other method it doesn't involve just casting it from your hand, it just turns into Ancestral Recall, it turns into a draw 3. In limited, this is just going to be a sorcery speed anticipate, which is like a D.
Yeah, it's like a D. Yeah, anticipate sometimes doesn't make the cut, and it's an instant. So D for See the Truth, and we hope that you will. Shacklegeist is next. This one is 1 and a blue for a 2/2 spirit at rare with flying. Very nice. Can only block creatures. Shacklegeist can only block creatures with flying. Okay, so not quite as good, but still good. And you can tap 2 untapped spirits you control to tap target creature you don't control. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, this is mostly an aggressive 2-mana 2/2 flyer, and that's totally fine. That's probably in the B- range, even with the blocking restriction. I think the ability just bumps it up to a solid B. There's not a ton of spirits, but you don't need to activate this ability very many times to have it be upside. You'll sometimes like play your second spirit, pass, tap their biggest creature, the next turn just attack with both spirits, and you got to trade like maybe one combat step with Shacklegeist for tapping their biggest creature. Pretty good. So I think Shacklegeist gets a B. I would not call this a build around. I would, of course, bias towards having more spirits when I had this, but in general, I'm just putting this in my aggressive blue decks. Not a particularly good controlling card.
Yeah, agreed. And also interesting with the Ghostly Pilferer, these are both rare, so you won't see them together too often, but you can see the angle here on spirits is to attack, yes, and get these things going. So I mentioned you want to find ways to tap it. Well, if you get lucky and get both of these, you could do that, but that's going to be tough. Next is Stormwing Entity. This is 3 blue for a 3/3 flying elemental. It's rare. That's not really that impressive. This spell costs 2 and a blue less to cast if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. It has prowess, so whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And when Stormwing Entity enters the battlefield, you scry 2. Well, that's a lot of rules text on this thing. So not loving that first part, though.
I think the fact that it only costs 2 mana when you played a spell this turn, like instant or sorcery, it is a pretty powerful effect. So any spell that costs 1 or 2 mana, you're getting a mana advantage. You're breaking even at a 3 mana spell, but you're still getting to play 2 cards in the same turn. And you know what? 5 mana, 3/3 flying prowess, scry 2 is not a bad deal.
No,
you would put that card in your blue decks. So the fact that every now and then you cast an opt, which is a common, or any other cheap spell, and all of a sudden you're just like, boop, turn 3 Stormwing Entity, turn 4 Stormwing Entity, like that's a pretty big game.
No, that's true. You're right.
I like Stormwing Entity. I think that this is just a powerful card. It gets much better the more cheap spells you have, obviously. But even in a deck lacking those, it's still decent. And of course, the prowess also rewards you for spells. So we're thinking a spell-focused deck here, of course. But I would, in general, be happy with this card. 5 mana, 3/3 flying, scry 2 with prowess. That, again, that's just a good deal. So I would give Stormwing Entity a B+. I think that it's got a solid floor and good upside.
Yeah, I like B+ for Stormwing Entity as well. Sublime Epiphany is next. It's 4 blue for an instant at rare. Choose one or more. Counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, target player draws a card. You can choose as many of these as you want.
Yep, it's a mega cryptic. It's a 6-mana super cryptic.
That's insane.
It's going to be hard to get all of them at once.
Yeah, that would be an achievement unlocked scenario.
So here's how this card works. The most common use case is you're going to pass with 6 mana up. They're going to play something, really anything. Once you've got this locked and loaded, no matter what they play, they're like Walking Corpse. You're like, all right, Sublime Epiphany. But what you're going to do is you're going to counter the spell they played. You're going to bounce their best creature. You're going to copy your best creature, and you're going to draw a card. So that's straight up a 3-for-1 in terms of you're getting a counter, a copy, and a draw. That's a 3-for-1. You're also getting a bounce, which is like half a card. Mm-hmm. And then every now and then you're going to get to counter an activated or triggered ability instead. Imagine they had a planeswalker they're about to ultimate, or they just have like a powerful thing in play that is going to trigger, and you really want a way to stop that. Also, one of the things that's so sick about this card is, yes, it's a 6-mana card. Your opponent can play around it by not playing anything. Guess what? End of their turn, bounce their biggest creature, copy your creature, draw a card. You played a 6-mana clone draw card that also has a Mana War attached.
That's insane.
Like, that's a pretty good fail case, you know?
This card seems awesome. Like it just feels like you need to get this thing onto the stack and you're going to have a massive advantage.
Yeah, it's a card that it's really hard to imagine the board being bad for you after you cast this. Like, yes, maybe you don't have a good creature to copy, or bouncing isn't that effective. But, you know, in those cases, maybe countering a spell is going to be pretty powerful because you get a chance to wait a little bit. So Sublime Epiphany looks not only very, very fun to play because it's got endless possibilities, but it also looks just busted. This Sublime Epiphany looks like an A+ to me. It just looks like it'll when you're ahead, it's going to crush them. When you're behind, it'll get you back, and when you're at parity, it'll put you to winning. Yeah, there's really not a way for this to not work out well for you.
No, A+ for Sublime Epiphany. The card just seems absolutely broken. That is awesome. I want to play that card like right now. Speaking of, here's Teferi, Master of Time. 2 blue for a legendary Planeswalker Teferi at Mythic Rare. 3 loyalty on a 4-mana Planeswalker, but a very important static ability. You may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time, on any player's turn, anytime you could cast an instant. What does that actually mean?
It means that you get to use it on your turn and use it on their turn.
Okay, that's the key here.
It's double activation because just inherent to Planeswalkers is that you get to use them once per turn at sorcery speed. Well, you remove the sorcery speed part, and the once per turn part doesn't specify just your turn. Okay.
So +1, draw a card, then discard a card. So loot. -3, target creature you don't control phases out. And that is treat it and anything attached to it as though they don't exist until the controller's next turn, which is a kind of clever way to put that. And then the ultimate is -10. Take 2 extra turns after this one. So this thing's going up +1 loyalty on your turn, +1 loyalty on their turn minimum, where you're looting twice before it's even your turn again, and that's at 5 loyalty by the time your opponent has a chance to attack Teferi.
And another common play pattern is you play Teferi, +1 it. On their turn, you -3 it on whatever their most threatening creature is, which prevents it from attacking you or Teferi, and then also prevents it from blocking. And then at the start of their next turn, it kind of comes back in. Note that phasing is hard to describe with rules language, but think about it this way. It's like if you just covered the card up, but everything about it remained the same. It keeps counters. It keeps auras. If you phase out a token, it comes back. Mm-hmm. It's not a bounce spell.
It's not being exiled temporarily. It's different than that.
No.
Yeah.
So Teferi's phasing ability is actually a lot less powerful than you might think if you compare it to other Teferis or to any exile or bounce effects, because it doesn't just dunk on tokens or auras or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It also doesn't re-trigger enter the battlefield abilities because the creature didn't leave. It just kind of chilled. Right. So I think Teferi is fine, but I don't think Teferi is that good. The main thing is Teferi doesn't do a particularly good job of protecting himself. Imagine, the kind of litmus test is if you played this Planeswalker on turn 4 and they had a creature in play, mm-hmm. or even better, a flyer in play, how would it do? Teferi does okay, buys you a turn, +1 Teferi, -3 phase their thing out. On your turn, you've got a 1 loyalty Teferi that you can loot, and then loot again. It goes up to 3 on their turn. That doesn't really stop a 3/3, and even a 2/2 is going to pressure it and kill it in short order.
Yeah. So the question is, how valuable is it to temporarily, like, basically give yourself the chance to untap, play a land, play something from your hand to protect Teferi? How important is that in the equation?
I mean, that's fine, but the problem is Teferi is still just sitting there letting you draw a card, then discard a card on their turn and your turn. Mm-hmm. That's not bad. It does tear through your deck, but you're not really getting a huge advantage out of it.
I see.
I would lean towards playing this. I think you'd probably just put this in your deck, but I don't think this is a bomb, and I think it's going to be worse than a lot of commons and uncommons. Yeah, like Scorching Dragonfire is better than Teferi, for example. Okay,
yeah, I think a good way to put this as well is that there's many planeswalkers that when you play them, draw you a card or kill a creature. In other words, that their baseline is they use up some chunk of loyalty and they trade for a card, either getting one in your hand or taking one off the battlefield or even taking one out of your opponent's hand. And Teferi is, you're down a card with Teferi unless you can ultimate it. Doesn't mean that it's bad, but you're not getting a card out of this. So that's that matters.
The decks that will want this are the blue-black reanimator decks that actively want looting to make their deck work. Because this is a great follow-up to a turn 5 Rise Again, reanimating something good, right? A great precursor to that. Turn 4 Teferi, +1, dump my big creature, phase out your creature. Next turn, +1 again, cast my reanimation spell. On your turn, keep +1ing, and maybe they've got bigger things to worry about than Teferi.
Yeah.
But compare this to Reign of Revelation. Draw 3, discard 1 for 4 mana. The Reign of Revelation is better. It just takes a lot of turns of Teferi out before that's not the case. So, and I don't value the ultimate very highly, because if you can sit there on Teferi for 4 turns without it getting attacked, then it feels like you've got the game in a pretty good position, and maybe the Teferi is not really contributing to that.
Right. You will win the game with the ultimate, but that wasn't what won you the game. Yeah. I still want to make sure that we value looting properly, which is, it's a very powerful ability. It basically means as long as you have Teferi out, you're never drawing another land. Like, you're going to be casting spells every turn as long as Teferi's out. If you get to loot twice per turn cycle, that's very powerful. This is 4 mana though. It's expensive for that. I would put Teferi in the B range myself. I would say like a B. I would say B for Teferi. Where are you at on Teferi Master of Time?
I think Teferi's a C.
Okay.
I think Teferi is kind of like a replaceable card that you really should not prioritize, and becomes something like a C+ in the Reanimator deck, but really just not a great card.
So I guess my comparison goes to a card like Merfolk Looter, which is a card that doesn't cost you any mana to loot, and you can do once per turn, and I value very highly for limited. In fact, they don't even print cards like that anymore. That was an uncommon in its last printings. Teferi costs double what Merfolk Looter costs, but lets you loot more, and also has this extra stuff going on. How would you compare the two? Because I would give Looter like a B or something as well.
I think Looter's quite a bit better because Looter doesn't die. I mean, it dies to removal, but that's a 1-for-1. Teferi dies to their creatures. That's the main issue I have is I feel like the net result of Teferi is going to be 4 mana, draw 3 cards, discard 3 cards, gain 2 life.
Okay. That makes sense. I hear you. That is a very good point. Yeah, whatever they had to attack at Teferi. But they didn't have to use a card to get rid of it where they would have with a looter. That makes sense. All right. Well,
yeah, that's the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, that's a big difference. That's a really good point. So we'll see what Teferi Master of Time ends up doing on the battlefield in M21. Teferi's Ageless Insight is next. This is 2 blue for a legendary enchantment at rare. If you would draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. Ooh.
Basically, it makes all of your cycling and cantrips and, cycling I guess not so much in this set though, but it makes all your cantrips into draw 2s. So all your ops become draw 2s. Any card that draws you a card just becomes a draw 2. I guess a Reign of Revelation becomes a draw 6, discard 1.
Okay.
So basically, I like Teferi specifically, Teferi's Ageless Insight. I like it specifically with Opt and basically not anywhere else, because I don't want to spend 4 mana, do nothing, potentially have a card that doesn't do anything, right? Like if this does nothing the turn you play it, but imagine you play this and don't draw any ops, like this card is just a straight up blank.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's an F. Like I wouldn't even really want to build around it.
Yeah. Basically, if I had 3 or 4 ops like and a couple other card draw spells, I could see this. But even then, like, now this is just too bad. I would give Teferi's Ageless Insight an F.
Yeah. I think that Teferi needs to go back to the drawing board on the insight there. And you're going to get an F there, Chief. All right. Let's move on to black. Our first card is one you mentioned a minute ago, Demonic Embrace. This is 1 black for an enchantment aura at rare. Enchant creature. The enchanted creature gets +3/+1, has flying, and is a demon in addition to its other types. Very aggressive. You may cast Demonic Embrace from your graveyard by paying 3 life and discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs.
This card's amazing.
Yeah, that's like +3/+1 and flying is exactly what I want. And if they kill my creature and I can just throw this on like a random 1/1 and make it into a 4/2 flyer. Yeah.
And think of this less as an aura and more as an equipment card. It's effectively an equipment. Yeah. Because you don't get a chance, you don't get to choose what to move it, and if they face fetters you, you're out of luck. But you Demonic Embrace your 2/2. Now it's a 5-power flyer. You hit them for 5. On their turn, they're like, wow, I've got to kill that thing. They kill or bounce, and this heads to the graveyard, and then you're like, all right, I'll pay 3 life. That's a very real cost. And I'll discard a card. That's less of a cost when because usually you can have your worst card in hand is not that good, and all of a sudden they're in the same position again. Right. And at some point they're going to run out of removal and they'll just be dead. Also, if you get them on the back foot and you're getting 1 hit per Embrace cast, that's already great. I think Demonic Embrace is. This card's an A, and I would look to draft a low curve deck, an aggressive deck, because I can tell you, if your opponent plays a 2-mana 3/1 and then you tap out for whatever it is you play and then they put Demonic Embrace, there's going to be a lot of games you're like, I cannot win this game. Yep. It is impossible. I'm going to take 6. I'm going to kill their creature. They're going to present the same threat again. They're hitting me so hard that the life loss doesn't matter from flashing this back, and they're killing me so fast that like there's just not much I can do about it. There's very few cards that really answer this. Because remember, enchant removal doesn't even kill it.
Right. I think that like people are going to look at the card, look down at their hand, think about what's in their deck, and they're going to go, I don't have enough removal. I can't kill every single creature that you put out. And there's also scenarios where you can put this on like a lifelink creature or something to mitigate the loss. You also can discard this Demonic Embrace to looting or whatever and get it back from the graveyard. You know, if that scenario, you know, if you have a tough decision on what to keep in your hand or whatever. So yeah, A for Demonic Embrace. That card seems like such a pain. One of the only ways I can think of is there is a Capture Sphere as well as Faith's Fetters. Like these are the ways that you really want to deal with this to try to make them kill their own creature.
The other option is put pressure on your opponent and have removal. Like imagine a red-black deck that's like attacking you back and they Scorching Dragonfire a creature and then they kill your second creature and all of a sudden you're on the back foot and you can't use Demonic Embrace to win the race because you're already too far behind. It's not good if you're the one getting attacked.
That's right. Grim Tutor is next. 1 black for a sorcery. It's mythic rare. Last time it was printed, there wasn't even such thing as a mythic rare. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, and shuffle your library. You lose 3 life.
Yeah. So Grim Tutor is going to be overvalued both in constructed and limited because of its pedigree. This card was a starter card that was at times worth
starter
like over
$19.99 or whatever.
Over $100. It saw like a little bit of vintage play. You know, it's just like one of those cool old powerful cards. This card sucks. This card's
not good.
It's not even close to playable.
It's so funny.
There's no card that is worth 3 mana and 3 life to get into your hand. Right. Like even something like Ugin, like you just don't want this card in your deck.
Right.
The only use I could look, this card's an F. I could see very, very corner cases of a control matchup where the life doesn't matter and your good cards are really all that matters and the games go long and you can use Grim Tutor as a way to have an extra good card in your deck. Sure. That's a very, very narrow case. In general, just do not put Grim Tutor in your deck. This card is not good.
Yeah, F for Grim Tutor. I know it looks good and it'll be tempting, but you'll win more if you don't put this in your deck. Hooded Blightfang is next. This is 2 black for a 1/4 creature snake at rare. It's got Death Touch. 1/4 Death Touch is nice. Like, that is a really sweet.
Oh, yeah, that's a house.
It's a house. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that, of course, counts for it and any others. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. Okay, so that's not as relevant here. But the first 2 lines are 1/4 Death Touch is already extremely, it's going to be board dominant, even if it doesn't look like it at first glance. And then the other part really matters. I mean, you get to drain them whenever you attack with this thing. That's a great little combination of abilities on this.
Yeah, you would always play a 1 mana or 3 mana 1/4 Death Touch because that just locks up the board. And then the second ability gives you exactly what you want, which is a way to make this into more pressure. Because a 1/4 Death Touch gets ignored on offense most of the time, but is a great defender. This is actually good on both. It's a 3-point life swing whenever it attacks.
Yes.
So it also buffs your other Death Touch creatures by draining with them as well. Which is, that's not nothing. It's going to come up every now and then. Of course, killing planeswalkers, whatever. That's not something we focus on too much in Limited, though.
Right.
Could snipe a Nugan every now and then.
Yeah.
I think Hooded Blightfang gets a B+. It's just going to be a card you're always going to play. It's going to always have a pretty big impact on the board. It does die to removal just like everything else, and if they have some flyers going, maybe they can ignore it. But Hooded Blightfang is going to have a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I like B+ for Hooded Blightfang. Really sweet card. And not overpowered. I like that too from a rare. Karavek the Spiteful is next. 2 black for a legendary human warlock at rare. Karavek is a 3/2 with static ability. Other creatures get -1/-1. So
Karavek's a very powerful card, but it takes a little bit of finagling. You basically, you don't want to put a bunch of X1s in your deck, and you generally don't want to be an aggressive deck. But this can be a board dominant card otherwise. So first of all, it effectively is kind of like a 4/3 in terms of combat, right? Because anything that it can tangle with will be getting -1/-1. And in fact, it's even slightly better because they if they have like multiple creatures out, this is affecting all of them. So it might even make double blocks a little worse. Mm-hmm. It's going to immediately kill all their X1s, which is nice, and just make it really hard for them to kill you through this card. That said, it's got 2 toughness. Sometimes they'll kill it and nothing big will happen. Sometimes they'll be playing a green deck with Colossal Dreadmaws and kind of shrug off the effect. I think the fact that this is difficult to slot in because it puts some deck building costs on you and won't be effective against every deck makes it not the best card in the world. My inclination is to give Karavek a C+, which in some matchups this will be an A.
Yeah.
You will play against some people who've got a bunch of X1s who are like, wow, I can't beat Karavek. And in some matchups, it'll be a D. I think it's going to mostly be somewhere in between there. And it'll cost you a little bit because it'll affect your picks, but not in a good way. Like it'll make you do things you normally wouldn't do because of the effect of Karavek. So that is a cost. I would give Karavek a C+ and really just be mindful of like what kind of what their creature composition is when deciding kind of how much you want to value it.
Yeah, that's a good average case for it because it is really difficult to figure out how good it is on any given board. It might be worse for you than for your opponent. And that's pretty awkward. So C+ for Karavek the Spiteful. Next is Liliana, Waker of the Dead. 2 black for a 4 loyalty legendary Liliana Planeswalker at Mythic Rare, of course. +1. Each player discards a card. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. Okay. -3, which you can do right away and still keep Liliana on the battlefield. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. That's cool. And then the ultimate is -7, which is attainable. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put target creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Excuse me, I misspoke. From a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, Liliana is not bad. Liliana has kind of had a string of like somewhat mediocre planeswalkers in Limited. I guess Liliana Dreadhorde General being the exception, but there have been some. And Liliana Waker of the Dead's kind of in the middle there. You're going to play this, and if you have a stocked graveyard, you play this, it goes down to 1 loyalty, you kill one of their creatures. All right, that's fine. If you're giving -3 or -4 it probably does function as a kill spell that leaves behind a planeswalker. Mm-hmm. The +1 is good. It's better for you than your opponent because you can choose whether to use it or not. This is one of the planeswalkers you may just not activate in a turn. And of course, it punishes them if they have no cards in their hand, whereas it does not punish you for that. Overall, we're talking a card that's probably worse than 4-mana kill a creature, I think, and probably on par with 5-mana kill a creature in terms of what you get out of this. You're just not gonna you're not gonna get too much more than a card out of this most of the time. Right. Sometimes you will, and that's the upside. But in general, you're gonna play Lily, kill a creature, probably lose Lily, or start plussing a few times, but then lose Lily, or plus twice and then -3 Lily. Either way, you're not up that much. So I would say Liliana is good, but not a bomb. Looks like a B- to me.
Yeah, I was going to actually say B+. I mean, there's scenarios, there's matchups where Liliana is extremely good against control decks. You just go +++ ultimate, and the control deck just doesn't have anything they can do about it. If they can't pressure her loyalty immediately, the ultimate actually does become a fairly big threat. I like that she can come down and potentially kill a creature right away. That's pretty powerful. In the scenarios where, something's happened on board a little bit ahead of it. I still see upside there beyond just I just think that it affects the game in a more impactful way sometimes than, a removal spell will or whatever. So I'll go a little higher on Liliana.
All right, that's fine.
I also like the art a lot. I also like that she's not as zombie centric, because the ones that we haven't liked quite as much for, in general or in limited have been really like, how many zombies do you have?
Super zombie focused. Yeah.
Okay. Next is Liliana's Standard Bearer. And this is 2 and a black for a 3/1 zombie knight. Speaking of, at rare with flash. When Liliana's Standard Bearer enters the battlefield, draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. Sure.
So, yeah, a 3-mana 3/1 flash is mediocre, but, playable. It doesn't take very much for this to draw 1 to 2 cards. And at that point, it becomes great. A 3-mana 3/1 flash draw card, fantastic.
Yeah.
A 3-mana 3/1 flash draw 2 cards, basically busted. Pretty close to it. We would give that card an A, of course.
Yeah.
So I think Liliana Standard Bearer is worse than those cards because you're not always going to get the cards out of it. But in a deck that's built with this in mind, I feel like it's not that hard to draw some cards.
No, I think so too. You can sacrifice or just wait till combat's done after you've traded off or even just lost a creature. Seems fine. And there's scenarios where you just cast this stupid thing and block their 4/3 or whatever. And you don't draw a card off of it, but you're still getting something out of it. Definitely in the B range for Liliana Standard Bearer, probably a B+. I mean, if you could draw 2 cards, that's insane.
Yeah, I would give Liliana Standard Bearer a B+. And if you get this card early, focus on, finding sacrifice outlets and cheap creatures and token making, things like Death Sport, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there you go. So B+ for Liliana Standard Bearer. Oh boy. Massacre Worm is next. 3 black for a 6/5 worm at Mythic rare. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. This card's insane. Yeah, this card's
Massacre Worm is an A+. It's really just it's not very complicated. You play this, you kill 2 or 3 of their creatures, they lose a bunch of life, and then they have a 6/5 to deal with that punishes them every other time one of their creatures dies.
Yeah, that's the thing that doesn't stand out at the beginning, is that it's not just from that initial -2/-2. It's whenever any of their things die for any reason, they lose 2 life. It adds up super fast. I mean, like you said, let's say it's just you play a 6/5, you kill 2 of their creatures, they lose 4 life. That's fantastic already. And this thing, you can play this second main phase after combat where you can be attack with everything, right? And they're like, okay, I'll make the obvious blocks. And you lose 3 or 4 creatures and you go Massacre Worm, kill the rest of your stuff, you take 8. And they're like, oh my God, right? And they're staring down a 6/5. To me, Massacre Worm's an A+. This is the type of card that overperforms relative to what it looks like, and it looks awesome. So there you go. I mean, this is a card you can play in cubes sometimes and have a good effect. So yeah, I like A+ for Massacre Worm. Are you with me on that one?
Oh yeah, Massacre Worm is just a solid A+, about as A+ as it gets.
Indeed. Next is Necromentia, which is 1 black for a sorcery at rare. Choose a card name other than a basic land card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles their library, then creates a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each card exiled from their hand this way. Well, Luis, I'm going to get out the soapbox and let you hop up on it because.
So these kind of cards are never good in limited. There has not been a single one that has been playable in limited. And, even though we talk about the situations where you might side one in, I think it does a disservice to people who are on the fence. These cards you should just never put in your deck. The ability to name a card in their deck and have them no longer draw that card is not an ability worth paying 3 mana and a card for. If you do snipe it out of their hand, they get a 2/2, so you're still down a card and down 3 mana, and now they have a 2/2 in play, though they're down a card as well. And even, really the scenario we talk about is when they have an Ugin in your deck and you're blue-black control and don't have a good answer to it, yeah, I guess that does cut that out, but there's not that many cards in limited that are so integral to a deck strategy that they can't win without it. So Necromentia gets an F, and it's really not the kind of card you should be playing unless you really, really, really know what you're doing, which, I've never sided one of these cards in Unlimited, and I've done a lot of drafts.
So there you go. That's a good, the rule of thumb that we like to use for these things are if you just decided never to play Necromentia over the course of the format, you would be better off than trying to navigate the times when it was actually correct to do so from a win point percentage. So F for Necromentia. Next is Peer into the Abyss. This is 4 black. That's right. 7 mana for a sorcery at a rare. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life. Round up each time. Oh, dude.
Yeah. This is a weirdo. So you're talking in limited. Let's say you cast this on turn 7. So it's like a draw 12 or 13 cards, lose half your life. The thing is, you also have to discard end of turn, so it's not even like you get to keep all the cards. And then nugging your opponent for half their life and half their cards.
Well, by definition, you're not killing them with it, right?
And then they end up with a full hand of cards to beat you with. Right. Peer into the Abyss is an F. I can't get behind this one. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Peer into the Abyss. You're really cool, but no. Next is Thieves Guild Enforcer. This is black for a human rogue at rare with flash. It's a 1/1. Whenever Thieves Guild Enforcer or another rogue enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 2 cards. And again, that means put the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. As long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, Thieves Guild Enforcer gets +2/+1 and has Death Touch. 8's a lot of cards, but this is kind of cool, actually.
It's really only 6 because this one spots you 2. And if they've played a card or 2, it really takes the mid. By the time the mid game rolls around, this probably gets there. And if you have any other rogues to back it up, because it mills 2 per rogue, that helps quite a bit. Without the +2/+1 and Death Touch, this card's of course quite bad. It gives you a little bit of backup for a mill deck, though it doesn't seem like there's that much support. I think if you had this in a blue-black deck with Teferi's Mill 2 every turn, then this could be Teferi's Tutelage or whatever. Then this could be a good backup to that, especially since this will always be a 3/2 if you've got the Mills theme going.
It's strange that this is a 1-drop creature that is actually just much, much better in the late game than it is in the early game.
Yeah. I think overall this card is probably fine in any slower deck or deck with 2 to 3 other rogues, especially if you have any other ways to mill or even just attrition. Like you have, Grasp of Darkness and Mind Rot, stuff like that really does help load this up, because 1 mana to kill an attacking creature is pretty good, and you can also just flash this in and start attacking them, or just let it sit and play and start milling them out.
Yeah, I'm really not that high on it, though. Neither of these scenarios make me very excited. The mill part is kind of the most interesting part, but if you told me I could have a 3/2 Death Touch for the late game only, I would say that's fine. It trades off for something and it can attack, but that's nothing to write home about, right? That is a 2 toughness Death Toucher trades off for almost everything anyway. That would care about it at that point in the game. C C plus maybe?
I would give Thieves Guild Enforcer a C. In the right deck, this can perform as high as a C plus, but this is never going to be broken. Like the best this can possibly be is a 5 or 6 rogue deck that's also trying to mill the opponent out and is really going aggro on that. But that's just not going to be very often. So I like C on Thieves Guild Enforcer.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that the milling of your opponent is usually a downside, right? Like you could be feeding synergies or whatever. Last black card is Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. 2 and a black for a 1/3 legendary vampire cleric at rare. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. That's nice. 3 black creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Wow, that's powerful. Is that first part the Sanguine Bond or whatever? Is that that type of effect? Yeah, that's a very powerful static ability, especially since the activated ability just gives all of your creatures lifelink. I mean, you could easily set up a lethal attack by doing that.
I mean, the combination of the 2 abilities means at some point you're going to be able to pay 5 and they lose life equal to the power of all your creatures. You know, assuming they don't have a trick. Of course, if they bounce this or kill this, then you might end up in a spot where you made an alpha strike and don't kill them. But at least you gain a bunch of life. So
so the life
you're
gain
probably
part
not dead on the way back.
Would stick around, but you wouldn't get the other side because Veto's gone. Card seems good. I mean, it's a 3 mana 1/3. It's almost like an enchantment, right? That they could kill with a burn spell or something, because, you know, combat wise, Veto's not doing a whole heck of a lot for you. Yeah,
it has a nice synergy with other life gain cards. Revitalize turns into a lava spike that still gains you the 3. All your lifelink creatures kind of deal double damage. And I think really what this card is about is setting up the 5 mana effect. Like, you just play this and at some point your opponent just knows that you're just going to be able to spend 5 and then attack them and they take 10. You know, they can't really stop that. So what this is asking of you is not that much. First of all, in a life gain deck, this will do something by itself without even activating it. It'll sit there and eventually, you know, drain them out. In a deck with 0 other life gain, this is still good. And you spent 3 mana for a 1/3. That's not a huge loss. Like that still affects the board. So
and this is a card that they're going to want to kill as the game goes further and further along.
Yeah, so. I'm inclined to give Veto probably a B plus. I was thinking between B plus, A minus. I think B plus is probably right. This is a very threatening card in the late game.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking between B and B plus, but I agree with you that B plus is where I would land too. All right, red is next. First card is called Brash Taunter. It's 4 and a red for a 1/1. It's a goblin. It's rare. So we have a 5 mana 1/1. It's indestructible. Whenever Brash Taunter deals damage, or is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And you can pay 2 and a red, tap it to have Brash Taunter fight another creature until end of turn. This is just the best.
Oh yeah, this is kind of like a stuffy doll reprint.
Yeah, but an angry stuffy doll. It's really good.
It's actually really strong.
Yeah.
Imagine you're playing against a deck that doesn't have exile or -1/-1 effects. You cast this and they can no longer attack you on the ground, because if you block a 4/4, they take 4 and you take nothing.
Right.
And then the fight ability means they're about to start taking damage equal to the power of their greatest creature. This ends the game fairly quickly while also prolonging the game by stalling out the board, which is a great combination. It protects you, gives you a win condition, and is very hard to deal with, though there are some ways to deal with it. So Brash Taunter looks very good to me. I would give Brash Taunter an A minus.
You know what? I play this and look at my opponent, and if they're playing green red, they just lose.
Yeah, the best out to this is Colossal Dreadmaw, because it can trample works very well against this. You only have to assign 1 to this, but even then, this can start fighting it, and then your opponent's just taking 6.
Right. So it's a pretty hard card to race. Yeah,
it's a beating for sure.
Okay, I like A minus somehow on Brash Taunter. The real question is, does it die or get any of the blue or white removal spells on it or whatever to
Capture Sphere stops it, Face Fetter stops it, any of the black -X effects like Grasp of Darkness, for example, or Pestilence Haze will kill this. But like you said, against like a red green deck, they're gonna be a boatload of trouble against this.
Yeah. It's a really funny card too. All right, that was Brash Taunter. Next is Chandra, Heart of Fire. So here's our Chandra Planeswalker for M21. 3 red for a 5 loyalty mythic. And her +1 is discard your hand, then exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may play the cards exiled this way. Yikes. Okay. Another +1, by the way. No middle minus ability here. Chandra, Heart of Fire deals 2 damage to any target. Dang, that's pretty good. Ultimate is -9, so definitely in range as well. Search your graveyard and library for any number of red instant and or sorcery cards. Exile them, then shuffle your library. You may cast them this turn, and you add 6 red mana to your mana pool.
Yeah, Chandra is the real deal. I mean, a 5 mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker that ticks up to cast Shock, that's already very good. Yeah. Your opponent's going to have a hard time killing that because it can withstand a couple hits. It can pick off small creatures or flyers. It also gets you a fresh hand of 3 cards when you +1 it. You have to discard your hand, but imagine you go, Chandra, tick it up to kill your 2/2. Your opponent attacks it down to 3. Let's say they have a 3/3 on the board. Next turn, if you have good cards to play, you play them and tick it up and shock something. If you don't, you just tick it up and discard your hand, exile the top 3 cards, and maybe play 1 or 2 cards. You can play lands from that as well. It's not cast. And again, it just keeps ticking up. The -9 might not be good. Like there's a lot of decks where that's just not going to do all that much.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. The first 2 abilities already make this an A. Chandra, Heart of Fire is a fantastic card.
Yeah, A for Chandra, Heart of Fire. And I think you need to be pretty aggressive with how you use that first +1. I mean, if you get to the point where you have enough mana and you're effectively drawing 3 cards a turn, you're good to go. You're going to win that game. Next is Chandra's Incinerator. This is 5 and a red for a 6/6 elemental at rare. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. Chandra's Incinerator has trample, so 6/6 trample for 6. That's kind of your baseline. This extra stuff is extra. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerator deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Wow. So this thing is double. It's rewarding you by getting it onto the battlefield sooner if you have these non-combat damage sources, but then cool in that if you draw them later, it also still gives you a benefit if Chandra's Incinerator's on the battlefield. And it's really insane benefit too.
Yeah, this is kind of a lot of words to say Colossal Dreadmaw, though.
It is a 6/6 trampler at its heart, isn't it?
It also really isn't going to be much more than that. There's just not that many ways to utilize this. Like, most of the setups that make it cheaper, you spent mana or cards, and I don't think that it's that much better than just casting it. Like, we're not talking Rift Bolts and Lava Spikes like we would be in Modern.
Right.
And then once you have it in play, like Scorching Dragonfire doesn't work with this. You can shock your opponent, and then this deals 2 to one of their creatures, so you got an extra 2 damage. There's, you can Volcanic Geyser them for 5 to kill their 5/5. Like, yeah, that's upside, but it's not massive upside.
No, you're right.
Look, a 6 mana 6/6 trample is fine. Red also doesn't usually get big creatures at this rate. So it's not like this card is bad to begin with, but it's just not going to often perform above that level. So my inclination is to give Chandra's Incinerator a C, and then sometimes it'll operate at a higher level than that. But in general, just look at this as a fancy Colossal Dreadmaw.
No, you're totally right, though, because the Turn to Slag doesn't hit players. What's it called?
When you hit them with a Goblin Arsonist, you can cast this on turn 5.
Yeah, so just not quite enough upside in this particular limited set to make Chandra's Incinerator better than a C, or maybe a C+ on occasion. Next is Conspicuous Snoop. This is red for a 2/2 Goblin Rogue at rare. These cards are just funny. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast goblin spells from the top of your library. As long as the top card of your library is a goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card.
So Yeah, this card's a weirdo.
Yeah. In many ways, but it just feels like it's going to be so hard to build like a goblin tribal deck here, right? To make real use of getting the card advantage from this card.
Yeah, you need to have a lot of goblins, especially since the activated ability part is really just not a thing. And I mean, where I would want this is a base red deck that has 3 or 4 other goblins. With Goblin Arsonist around, that's not that impossible to do. And this is a kind of hard to cast Grizzly Bear. It's a red for a 2/2. That's fine. It's not good, but if you draw a card, if you draw half a card from this, you're happy. So if you have a couple other goblins in your deck, this is already probably good enough to play, but in no way is it a bomb.
No, and I'll tell you that there are 4 goblins in the set total, and we've already covered 2 of them in the rare slots today. So that means the only ones left are the Arsonist that you mentioned and the Battle Rattle Shaman, which doesn't.
Those are both fine.
Yeah, which doesn't. Neither of those even have.
No, the activated ability part's not really going to come up.
Yeah, the only goblin in the set with an activated ability is Brash Taunter, and that would have your conspicuous Snoop tap to fight something else as a 2/2. So that's, the fact is this is effectively a 2-mana 2/2, and the 2 mana is double red, which makes it not very good.
Yeah, the joke with this, of course, is in Modern, you play this, you play Bogart Harbinger, your top card's now a Kiki Jiki. You can make infinite conspicuous Snoops and then copy the Harbinger and go get a Mog Fanatic and then sack all the Snoops to deal 1. So it's a cool card for Constructed. It's not a limited card. I
would say it's a D. Like it's a 2/2 for 2 in an aggressive deck sometimes. And like you said, if you have a couple of goblins,
every now and then we'll get a card out of it.
There is some downside to playing with top card if your library revealed too, though. You do show your opponent some stuff. So keep that in mind. So D for conspicuous Snoop. Next is Double Vision, 3 red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Wow. It just forks every first instant or sorcery for you?
This actually looks like a solid build around. If you're playing a heavy spells deck and you take turn 5 off, you cast this on turn 5, you don't do anything. And then on turn 6, you're like Scorching Dragonfire your 2 creatures. On your turn, I cast Opt and draw 2. On my turn, I cast Turn to Slag, kill 2 creatures. And it's great with even like a bounce spell. Unsubstantiate's pretty strong with this. Turns it into bounce 2 things. Like, yeah. These are, and it plays very well with instants because you get to do 1 on your turn and 1 on their turn. This looks like a build around B to me. Most decks will not want it, but any deck that has like, something like 12-ish or more spells, especially ones that affect the board, Double Vision seems like it could be a legit way to win a long game. Yeah,
I like build around B for Double Vision. It's a weird deck. It's the blue-red deck, probably only. I mean, I could dream of black-red doubling stuff, but it's hard to get critical mass on instants and sorceries outside of blue-red realistically. But if I would play it. It also just seems sweet, right? It's just like doubling is always a fun thing to do. Ooh, I want a double Sublime Epiphany now.
That seems not necessary, but
yeah.
But you know what? It does seem like that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
you will probably win the game when you do that. Congrats.
Okay, good. I'll send you the screenshot if I ever make it happen. But I like build around B for Double Vision. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly the grade I would give it.
All right, Fiery Emancipation is next. This is 3 red. For an enchantment at Mythic Rare, if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So this reminds me, what was the Furnace of Wrath? Is that what it was called?
Yeah, Furnace of Wrath is 1 red. All damage is doubled.
Yeah.
This is all your sources. This card does big things, and I would never fault someone for wanting to play with it because it's sweet. But this card's really bad. We're talking just straight up F. Look, making your 2/2 into a 6/2 is cute. Making your 3/3 into a 9/3, but like, what for that to really even pay off, you actually have to be getting them through because otherwise their 2/2 still blocks yours. Yes. And sure, now your Turn to Slag deals 15 damage.
Yes,
congrats. You can shock your opponent for 6 now. I mean, I guess that's kind of good, but
yeah. But you also paid 3 red, and a shock. to get that 6 damage. It's funny because Fire Emancipation, if it were blue or white, would probably be pretty good because you could play it as like an overrun effect, hit them with the flyers, and the game just ends on the spot. Where in triple red, though, it's like it doesn't really fit the description here. So yeah, I would give it an F. But
yeah, it's an F, sadly.
Next is Gadrak the Crown Scourge. This is what does Gadrak do?
So Gadrak's 2 and a red for a 5/4 legendary dragon at rare. It has flying.
It's a 3-mana 5/4 flyer. All right, this is going to hurt.
It can't attack unless you control 4 or more artifacts, which obviously, that doesn't happen every day. But it has a triggered ability. At the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died. And treasures are artifacts that sack for a mana of any color. So a couple notes. It only triggers on your turn. So things that happen on your opponent's turn don't matter. It also triggers or gets a treasure for every creature that died, yours or theirs. So if you attack a 2/2 into their 2/2, you'll get 2 tokens end of turn.
Okay.
Gadrak seems very good. First of all, Gadrak can block. A 3-mana 5/4 flyer is going to keep basically everything off your back. There's not much your opponent can do to get through that without actually killing this, in which case you only spent 3 mana on it, and it's pretty hard to kill. It also does just, sit there biding its time, accumulating treasure. It will get to attack at some point. Enough creatures are going to die in most situations. Mm-hmm. And you can also use the treasure. Imagine you play Gadrak, you get a treasure, and then you decide you just want to play a 6-drop on turn 5 and make it so Gadrak attacks later in the game. Yeah, that's totally fine. You get to do that. So the sum of all this makes this a good card. It's good in control. It's also fine in aggro decks because aggro decks are the ones that often force trades. So what'll happen in an aggro deck is, let's say you go 2-drop into 3-drop, turn 4, you're like Gadrak, attack with both. Now your opponent can just take more damage, in which case it's fine, and they're not attacking you back because Gadrak's still just sitting there. Or they make some trades and Gadrak gets closer to attacking. Plus, every now and then you can just cast an artifact and attack them.
So this really is very trade when you're attacking centric, right? That is sort of the key focal point, because if you block and trade, you don't get the stuff because it's on your opponent's turn. So it's all about you being able to attack and have the creatures trade off so that you're not losing creatures just to get Gadrak going. Yeah. Right. So but like you said, that other stuff matters. The treasure tokens matter and the blocking matters. I mean, it's hard to imagine that Gadrak isn't going to give you an advantage, right? Like you can block all those small and medium stuff and just eat it. And then when you do finally trade off Gadrak, and let's say that him attacking is never going to happen, you're trading up in mana almost every time.
Yeah. It's just a great card. It's also, sometimes you'll have 3 treasure, and then on your turn, you'll just cast an artifact and attack them, and they did not expect that.
Totally. So I like Gadrak a lot. That's a powerful card. I don't know how well it fits into the aggressive red decks just because it can't attack a lot of the time. But I think I'd still just play it in those decks anyway. I
would always play this card.
Yeah.
Gadrak is an A-, and you should just put it in any deck. It's just a very good card.
All right.
Look, even in a deck without creatures, it's a 3-mana 5/4 defender, and if your deck has no creatures, then you're probably not that worried about this being able to attack. Mm-hmm. Plus, it just makes it so your removal spells turn into treasure-generating spells. That's pretty great.
If you do them on your turn, yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Gadrak the Crown Scourge, A-. Next is Subira Tulzidi Caravaner, and this is
I've done a couple set reviews, and every time I'm like, how do you spell this?
Yeah, that is a tough one.
It's not that proper names are bad to have in Magic cards. I think it's cool. Gadrak's also a weird card.
Yeah,
but it's the combination of two kind of like fantasy names in a row, followed by Caravaner, which is like a real word, but kind of modified a little bit and not a very common word. Yeah. So it comes into like, okay. So Subira Tulzidi Caravaner is 2 and a red for a 2/3 haste, a legendary human shaman, a rare. So 3 mana, 2/3 haste, has 2 activated abilities. The first one is pay 1. Another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So and this does not a tap ability, so you can start spending mana to make your other 2 X's unblockable. Okay. And 1 red tap, so this is activated and a tap ability. 1 red tap, discard your hand. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So the joke here is you have like, let's say 3 1/1s in play. You can spend 3 mana to make them all unblockable, an additional 2 and tap this, discard your hand. Then you attack with all of them and you draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
So pretty expensive and requires a bunch of other creatures, but a 3 mana 2/3 haste is not a bad aggressive creature. And even just the top activated ability, which makes things unblockable, there's a lot of games where this is in play and your opponent's like, I have to kill that or I'm taking 2 to 4 damage to turn off their other dorks.
Exactly. That's the thing that I see it as. That activated ability for 1 is really powerful. Like, that is super scary because it turns your early curve that you use to get your opponent down to 10 or 12 or 8 or whatever into your mid to late game plan as long as Subira's on the battlefield. You know how like you often draw your 2-drop on turn 8 and you're like, oh man, this doesn't really do anything. It's outclassed on the board. Not anymore. Subira says, get in there and join the other 2 that you already had. Now you're hitting for 6 a turn. The game's going to end very quickly. This card seems really powerful in an aggressive deck. Power 2 or less isn't that small and limited. That adds up really fast and you can do this as many times as you want per turn. So however many, 2/2s you have, you can send them in. To me, Subira Tulzidi Caravaner looks excellent in the aggressive decks that I expect from red, especially paired with white or sometimes black. And I would give Subira a B+ actually. Like this to me is a perfect bridge for an aggressive deck to curve out and then still have to demand an answer or else lose to my junky 2-drops in the mid to late game, which is exactly the type of card I want for those decks.
Yeah, I like B+ for Subira, but again, you do have to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Like that is required.
That is required. And you want to have a good curve of a lot of 2-drops. Next is Terror of the Peaks. Oh boy. This is 3 red for a mythic rare dragon. It's a 5/4 flyer for 5 mana. Pretty darn good. Spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks costs an additional 3 life to cast. So there's not a mana restriction, but rather a life extra cost. And then it also says whenever another creature enters a battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Yeah, so this card's just basically a can't lose. If you play it out and you get to untap with it and play a creature, you're going to win that game pretty easily. In your worst case scenario, your opponent kills Terror of the Peaks and has to pay 3 life on top of whatever other card and mana they had to spend for it. So you're not getting, you're still getting ahead on that transaction, and that's your worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Card's awesome.
I mean, Terror of the Peaks is a joke. It's an A+.
Yeah.
Like it's a 5 mana 5/4 flying, already great. It punishes your opponent for dealing with it. Okay, that's like a cherry on top. And then it just has this ability that means if you ever untap with it, you also just start accumulating a bunch of free lightning bolts and fire blasts out of nowhere.
Right.
But Terror of the Peaks is an A+. It's not even close to being like in the realm of reasonable when it comes to limited.
Agree. A+ for Terror of the Peaks.
This or Glorybringer.
I like Glorybringer a lot more.
Yeah, Glorybringer's better.
Yeah.
This has a higher upside because it can be a Glorybringer every turn.
Yes.
But it doesn't get you that card right away.
Right. This is open to sorcery speed removal that while the additional 3 life does matter, if they do have it, they kill your Terror of the Peaks and they say, fine, I paid my 3 life in my card and some mana, but they're out of the woods. With Glorybringer, they're like, well, I'm down my best card and now I kill your thing and I just got like a brutal 2-for-1. Next is Transmogrify. Was this? Why do I feel like I know the name of this card? Is this?
Did you read Calvin and Hobbes?
I did.
He's the transmogrifier. That was that cardboard box where he would turn into.
Where he wrote that on. I remember that.
Calvin and Hobbes is the GOAT, by the way. It's just incredible.
It is.
So Transmogrify is 3 in a red. It's a sorcery at rare. Exile target creature. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. That player puts that card on the battlefield, then shuffles the rest into their library. So it's a Luca -2 on a stick, basically. Though it doesn't go up in cost. It's just whatever the next creature is. This is an F in limited. There's no realistic way to make this work. Like the joke in Constructed is to use like Shark Typhoon or token generating cards, and then only have 1 creature in your deck to go get.
That's
but
a
in limited,
12
that's just
drop
not,
or whatever.
Yeah, not really a thing. So, and it doesn't even guarantee it's higher cost. So, if you transmogrify your 2-drop, you could just hit another 2-drop, and you spent 4 mana and 2 cards to get a 2-drop. That's not a good deal. So,
not going to work.
Transmogrify this right into your sideboard. This is an F.
It's an F. Also, the fact that it's a sorcery means you can't even make the excuse of, well, I save my creature from removal or whatever. So, F for Transmogrify. Last red card is Volcanic Salvo. This is 10 red. Yes, you heard me right. It is a 12 mana sorcery at rare. Better have some cost reduction or it's going right in the F category. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is a total power of creatures you control. All right, that's good. That's significant. Volcanic Salvo deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. So you can do 6 to one thing, 6 to another thing.
Basically, this reads very close to kill 2 creatures.
Kill 2 creatures.
And so at what cost would you pay to kill 2 creatures? I think at 6 mana, this card would be very good.
Yeah.
At 7 mana, it would be solid. At 8 mana, we're talking, okay, this is getting to be a stretch. This card sometimes will cost 2 mana. Yeah. I think realistically, this card is going to cost 4 to 6 mana a lot of the times you want to play it.
Yep.
And that's incredible. Imagine a game where you play a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and a 4-drop. At that point, that this is going to cost something like 4 mana.
Yes. Yeah, so, I'm in. Yeah.
This card's awesome. It's great in a creature heavy deck. You don't even need creatures that are astoundingly front heavy, because if you play a 2 mana 2/2, a 3 mana 3/2, and a 4 mana 3/3, and they've all live, this card already costs a very reasonable amount of mana.
4 mana, yeah, right there. So yeah, I'm in for Volcanic Salvo, especially in green-red, but
yeah, the way you really want to use this is don't trade off your creatures when you have this coming, because you want this to be cheap enough, and you also want it to have enough targets on their side. But yeah, even imagine this with Colossal Dreadmaw. You play a Dreadmaw on turn 6. If you untap, you guaranteed can cast this card.
Yep.
It doesn't take anything more than that. Volcanic Salvo gets an A from me, and if I know my opponent has it, I'm aggressively going after their creatures and or trying to have one good creature in play or have counter spells. There are ways to play around this, but it is just such a brutally powerful card. At some point, you just give up, right? Yes. At some point, your opponent has 4 creatures in your play. You're like, whatever. If they can cast Salvo, there's no way for me to stop that.
Yes, and your chances of win goes up so much when you can kill their 2 best creatures, which is what this does. So A for Volcanic Salvo, really powerful. That moves us to green. Azusa Lost But Seeking. She's back. 2 and a green for a 1/2 legendary human monk at rare. You may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. I know a lot of people are super excited about Azusa Lost But Seeking. Got really bad news for people that are excited about it and are also playing limited. This card sucks in limited.
Yeah, this card's unplayable in limited.
Yeah.
Basically, the problem with Azusa is you paid 3 mana for a 1/2 that does nothing on the board intrinsically, besides be a 1/2. She does not generate mana herself. And when you run out of lands to play, which you will very quickly, you don't get anything else out of it. So for Azusa to be good, the best case scenario mentality, right? Turn 3 Azusa, play a 4th land. Next turn, play 2 more lands, play a Colossal Dreadmaw. And that is good, right? That's a turn 4 Colossal Dreadmaw. The problem is if you're lacking lands, Azusa is just a dead card.
Yep.
And she's a bad top deck later in the game. And what if you didn't have the Colossal Dreadmaw? Okay, you have 7 lands in play on turn 4, but maybe you don't have anything to do with them. And one of the cards you used up, Azusa.
Right.
So,
and that's a really critical. I mean, think about the normal curve, right? You have 7 cards. If you're on the play, you play a land, you're down to 6. You draw a card for turn 2. You play a land. You're down to 6 again on turn 3. Let's say you don't even play anything from your hand. On turn 3, you draw a card up to 7. You play a land, you're at 6. You play Azusa, you're down to 5. You play 2 more lands, you're down to 3. This is your absolute peak case scenario for Azusa. And that doesn't leave you a whole lot of wiggle room. And that's your literal best case. If you played a 2-drop before that, you're down another card after that too. If you didn't have a land drop to hit, you literally just played a 1/2 for 3, and it's not getting any better. There will never be a point where you get to use the static ability on Azusa once you've emptied your hand. So, no. F for Azusa Lost But Seeking. You just shouldn't play
Basically, if everything lines up perfectly, the card is a C plus B minus level card.
Mm-hmm.
And in anytime you're missing any of the components, it's an F. So
Yep.
Azusa is not a card you should put in your deck. Well, it's a good reprint because Azusa is a very good modern card. So, I would say that you're often going to want to select Azusa for monetary concerns. Not nothing wrong with that. But Azusa is an F in terms of gameplay
for us limited junkies.
Speaking of cards that are good in draft, Elder Gargaroth. It feels like each color just about has one of these kind of Baneslayer-ish cards. Mm-hmm. This is a 3 green for a mythic beast. It's a 6/6. Vigilance, Reach, Trample. All right, 5 mana, 6/6 Vigilance, Reach, Trample. We've already the floor is an A here, just so we're clear. And it says whenever it attacks or blocks, choose one. Create a 3/3 beast, gain 3 life, draw a card. Okay. So I mean, clearly this card's an A+. Come on. And how this is going to work is if they can't kill it, you're just going to amass some incredible advantage because they can't attack into it, has reach, has vigilance, so even when it's hitting them, it's back to block. Can't get chumped, it has trample. And whenever it attacks, you immediately are up a card, either via drawing a card or making a 3/3. Most of the time, a 0 mana 3/3 is better than the average card in your deck. Obviously, depends on the board. Or if you're really far behind, you can gain 3 life. That's not a bad ability either. It's the least powerful ability, but it's also the one when you want it, it's the best. It's the one that will swing more games from losing to winning than any other ability, I think, because when you gain 3, you're just giving yourself more time with the Elder Gargaroth in play. Doesn't protect itself from like Doomblade or Fetters types of effects, but you know what? You can't have it all. So Elder Gargaroth is a pretty easy A+.
Yeah, A+ easily. And the interesting thing too is the vigilance and the reach are actually really important. The trample's extra and fine, but the fact that it has reach means if you play Elder Gargaroth, your opponent cannot attack you. Like there is going to be so few scenarios where they can send in their whole team with the risk that you either get a 3/3 beast or gain 3 life. They lose their biggest creature, period. Right? Like, cause it's a 6/6 reach. So whatever card, it's a 5/5 flyer. It's like, come on, gobbling this thing up, gaining 3 life. How in the world are they going to actually kill you with an attack like that? And it's obviously not sustainable if they're not killing you with that one attack step. And then the fact that it has vigilance means that you get to apply pressure to them when the pressure's there and still leave it back to block so that they still can't attack. So A+.
Sometimes you're also going to trade this for their creature plus a combat trick, leaving you up like multiple cards.
Yeah.
So,
and that's you're really like, oh man.
Yeah.
Right. Next is Feline Sovereign. This is 2 and a green for a 2/3 cat at rare. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have protection from dogs. Whenever one or more cats you control deal combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls.
Yeah, that ability is not particularly relevant. I guess it's cat shutting up your couch. Is that the idea?
Yeah, or knocking something off of the table or whatever.
Yeah, I think that this is mostly just going to be a 3 mana 2/3, and if you end up with a couple cats in your deck, of which there are not very many, then it has a slight extra text, but this Feline Sovereign looks like a D to me.
Yeah, a quick look shows that there are 6 cats in the set, I suppose. I actually wonder if this one's actually in this set. I don't think it is. So 5. There's Basri's Acolyte, Canopy Stalker, Feline Sovereign, the one we're looking at here, the Pride Malkin, and then the Sabertooth Mauler. So,
yeah, and they're also just not even that great. Like they're okay.
No, they're just okay. So really, it's a 3 mana 2/3. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Feline Sovereign gets a D from me. I can see playing it every now and then. I mean, look, if you're playing against a deck that has a bunch of artifacts and enchantments, and you have other cats, this can be pretty brutal. You can play this, hit with your saber-toothed cat and kill their face fetters on your other thing. That's a big swing, but
if you hit with this, it works too, right? Like,
yes, this also by itself can peck down.
So that's a thing. It's probably like a C. I mean, a 2 mana 2/3 that can take out an equipment or an enchantment or something if it does connect is something. It's not great though. I would give a Feline Sovereign a C. I wish the first line of text was more relevant. Next is Garrick Unleashed. Boy, he put his axe right in the way of the text, didn't he? 2 green for a 4 loyalty legendary Garruk at Mythic Rare. So back to the original 2GG here. Up to one target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. So a little mini overrun there. -2, create a 3/3 green beast token, creature token. Then if an opponent controls more creatures than you, put a loyalty counter on Garruk Unleashed. Nice. -7, the ultimate is you get an emblem with at the beginning of your end step, you may search your library for a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Sweet.
Yeah, this is solid. I mean, you play Garruk, and if you're on the offensive, this card's really hard to beat because you're going to give like one of your 4/4s +3/+3 and trample. Garruk also has 5 loyalties, so it can take at least 1 hit, which means you're like, play this +1, attack you for like 7 to 10 damage. They can maybe hit this back and not kill it. Then you probably kill them on your second turn.
Right.
Also, you can -2 to make a beast. So even if it's -2, even if like, you don't get the extra loyalty, 4 mana, make a beast, have a 2/2, have a 2 loyalty planeswalker in play that's threatening to either just cash in for another beast or attack +1. And you hit them with a 6/6 beast. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then often this will be effectively a -1 to make a beast if they have more creatures. So yeah, Garruk's good. This is not the planeswalkers in this set, Ugin aside, and I guess Chandra aside, haven't been that impactful, but Garruk is solid. I would say Garruk gets a B+. I mean, you're going to take this card most of the time you see it.
Yeah, I think I would give Garruk an A.
I think it's a little worse than that. If they imagine they have a 2/2 flyer in play, like some of the time that this is just not going to have like a massive impact. Though I guess you can just start spamming the +1 and racing them.
Yeah, I think I would just +1 my 2/2 and be like, take 5, and they're like, you can attack Garruk. We're racing. I'm taking no damage.
Yeah, I'm fine with A- for Garruk Unleashed.
Okay.
It's good. It is good.
Yeah, A- for Garruk Unleashed. Next is Garruk's Harbinger. This is 1 green for a 4/3 beast at rare. It has hexproof from black. So I like to see that they brought back that little twist rather than the protection stuff.
Protection is nonsense, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that. Whenever Garruk's Harbinger deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may reveal a creature card or Garruk Planeswalker card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
This card's fantastic.
It's great.
3 mana 4/3 that dodges black removal spells and effectively draws you a card whenever it hits them.
Yeah,
like
because you're looking at 4 cards, right? I mean, yeah, that's amazing, and it's draw a spell too. Yeah, Garruk's Harbinger seems fantastic. I mean, it's nothing fancy, but it's really strong. I mean, it's also just great stats. 3 mana 4/3 is like, yikes.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to give this an A-. I think that when your opponent plays this on turn 3, you're going to feel like you're losing the game pretty badly. And even later in the game, it's still just a solid creature that has a good ability when it hits. And some decks just won't be able to kill it with removal very easily.
I was going to say B+ on it just because it has 3 toughness and the only thing required on the other side is a creature with 3 power to trade off for it. Like, hexproof from black is nice for the removal spells, but if they have a 3/1 black creature, they're just like trade. It doesn't have.
Yeah, this card is very good with combat tricks because it prompts blocks, and especially with trample. I mean, obviously it's a combo with Garruk. Right. You go turn 3 this, turn 4 Garruk, hit for 7, get to look at my top 7.
Yeah.
Wow, just like they drew it up. But okay, sure. I think Garruk's Harbinger is B+ A- level. It's quite strong.
B+ from me for Garruk's Harbinger, A- from Luis Ish. Next is Heroic Intervention. 1 and a green for an instant at rare. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn.
I'm not a big fan of this card because it doesn't give you any stats, so it doesn't make you punch up. It just makes it so you don't lose any creatures this turn. And yeah, it stops removal spells. It stops sweepers, which is why it's good and constructed. It can stop, Wrath of God effects. I would say Heroic Intervention gets a D. It's just hard to use this card. You're infrequently going to get more than a 1-for-1, and usually it's going to be like a 1/2-for-1 or a 1-for-1. It's not going to be a huge swing.
Yeah, this is also one of those types of cards that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling. Like, I'm safe, I can protect my creatures, but it's actually underperforms, and you should be more willing to just say, I'm going to stick with a better game plan of trying to get my opponent dead or whatever, and if I lose, I lose. So D for Heroic Intervention. Next is Jolrael Mwanvuli Recluse. Goodness sakes. 1 and a green for a 1/2 legendary human druid at rare. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 green cat creature token. Activated ability, 4 green green. Until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is number of cards in your hand. My second card each turn.
So it makes all cantrips into cats, or at least, but you only get to do it once per turn.
Okay.
Like you draw your card for your draw step, then you cast Opt or Llanowar Visionary, and you get a cat. And that's kind of where it ends. It's pretty hard to activate this on your opponent's turn unless you have instant speed draw 2s, I guess. Rain of Revelation would do the trick, or double opt, I guess. And then, so kind of Jolrael sits around, makes a cat every now and then for 6 mana, if you've built up cards in hand, which of course combos with card draw as well, you can pay 6 to make all your creatures into like 4/4s. This is going to get a build around grade because by herself Jolrael doesn't do anything. But it's a solid build around. I would say Jolrael gets build around B, and you're looking to be blue-green with lots of ways to trigger her ability. If you can reliably do that and make a cat every turn, that is awesome. And if you're doing that, it means the 6-mana ability is probably going to be pretty strong too.
Yeah, where if you don't, neither, like the first ability doesn't happen at all, and the second ability actually probably makes your creatures worse.
Yes. So
because you have to play
again, the build around grade certainly in play here, but I like Jolrael at build around B.
Okay. B for build around B for Jolrael. Next is Primal Might. Green X sorcery at rare. Target creature you control gets +X until end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control.
Why is
this a rare?
This strikes me as the kind of card where it's the end of you have to lock the file and you're like, we need another rare. It's like, what uncommon can we move up to rare? Seriously, that is a very common thing. That's what I was
just asking. Why is this a rare? That's really funny.
Because you start to scan your uncommons and you're like, you know what? This one could go up to rare and this one could go down to common and then we're set. Or
and
let's bump this common up to uncommon and Primal Might up to rare. Like, seriously, I think that there's a good chance that is what happened here. Because whenever you see a card at a rarity that looks like a little off, there's just always a squeeze. Because you need 11 rares and 16 uncommons and 19 commons. And sometimes you're at 20 commons and 10 rares. And it's like, ooh, how do we do this? So, As for the card, it's very good.
It's very good.
You're going to spend 4 or 5 mana. You're going to kill their creature and whack them for a bunch of damage. You could also spend 1 mana. Like its baseline is Prey Upon.
Yeah, it is.
It's just 1 mana fight, and then however much mana you have or need to win the fight, you can spend it. So Primal Might looks. I would give it a B plus. It's a pretty strong card.
Yeah, I give it a B. I mean, it's just like it's solid. And that is a way to get in for a heck of a lot of damage. So B plus for Primal Might. Why are you a rare? Next is, oh my God, Scavenging Ooze is back. 1 and a green for a creature ooze. It's a rare. It's a 2/2. It has an activated ability. Green, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze and you gain 1 life.
Yep.
This card is awesome.
Scavenging Ooze is just a dominant card. You have this on the board. Any creature that dies is eventually going to be translated into a +1/+1 counter plus a life. It can really screw up Reanimator decks. Mm-hmm. It can also just eat non-creatures, like if they're trying to get Frantic Inventory going, or if they have, any of the spells in your graveyard stuff at all. This just disrupts that. And it's kind of effectively, it'll sometimes be like a 6/6 or a 7/7. If this is left unchecked, it's hard for your opponent to feel like they're winning because you're gaining life and getting counters off basically any interaction. So Scavenging Ooze is an A. This card just has a huge impact on the game. It's not even that good on turn 2, but it's great when you play this on turn 5 or 6. And you can cast it turn 2, and of course that's fine. But it's a card that really gets stronger as the game goes on, and is a very, very strong card just kind of by itself.
Yeah, A for Scavenging Ooze, and I know it doesn't look like one, but wait till you play with it and you'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Next is Spore Web Weaver. This is 2 and a green for a spider. It's a 1/4 reach hexproof from blue at rare. Whenever it's dealt damage, you gain 1 life and create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token.
The Spore Web Weaver is a fantastic control card. Mm-hmm. You play this, it's hard to attack into because you need a 4-power creature. If you ever challenge it with anything less than that, the life plus the sapperling probably blunts whatever other attacks are going on. Like 2/3/3s can't actually make progress here. But like what'll happen, you attack with 2 3/3s into this. They're going to block one. They're going to take 2 because they're going to gain a life. Then next and get a sapperling. Then next turn you can't even attack because you just go chump, block, gain a life, make a sapperling.
Right.
So it holds off a pretty big squad. Hexproof from blue is not that valuable. I guess it doesn't get capture sphered, but for the most part, blue's not running around doing tons of targeting.
Right.
Still, this is I would give Spore Web Weaver a B and want to play it in control decks.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. B for Spore Web Weaver. That moves us to white, where we have the big hitter right off the bat, Bane Slayer Angel, 3 white for a 5/5 angel with flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons and from dragons. This is sort of the poster child for, broken rare that can be removed. And if it is, you're really bummed. But if it's not, you almost can't lose the game. You can't be attacked. You can win any race, etc. And, the key thing to remember is, it's worth noting that Baneslayer Angel can be removed and that is a weakness that it has, where some cards enter the battlefield, get you a lot of value, and then if they're removed, you're like, shrug. This is a little different from that, but it's also worth noting that the power level on this is cranked up to such a level that it absolutely must be removed basically immediately, and if not, you will win the game, and that's worth noting as well. So to me, Baneslayer Angel is in the A to A plus range because of how unbelievably strong it is on the battlefield. Seriously, as far as combat and being on the battlefield goes, it's one of the best creatures ever printed from that perspective for 5 mana.
Yeah, when I was playing in the beta draft qualifier at Vegas 2 years ago, and it was Dominaria draft, I'd first picked Lyra, Dawnbringer, who's effectively Baneslayer, same stats and everything. I played Lyra in the situation where my opponent had like 10 power worth of creatures, and this blocks the biggest creature and gains you 5. They couldn't attack, and I ended up winning that game. It's
crazy that games that this type of card can turn around.
Baneslayer Angel's an A+.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's funny that Baneslayer Angel's so kind of emblematic to Magic as a whole that there's a whole class of cards that, a lot of people would tend to call Baneslayers. Like Terror of the Peaks is a Baneslayer. Elder Gargadoth is a Baneslayer. Actually, if you want to break it down, there's Baneslayers and there's Mold Drifters. Mold Drifters are the ones that have an ability as soon as you cast them, a ETB, but you don't care about the body. Baneslayer is the opposite, where if they don't kill it, you often win the game, but it is vulnerable to removal. I think Magic is at its best, especially in Constructed, when Baneslayers are good. They're atrocious right now because of cards like Teferi and Elspeth Conquers Death, but that is a problem for people who play 60-card decks. In any case, Baneslayer Angel is an A+, classic card, and if you ever see this, you're going to be really happy taking it.
Yeah, this is the modern definition of a bomb, for sure.
Yeah.
Next is Basri Ket, which is 1 white for a 3 loyalty legendary planeswalker Basri at Mythic, +1. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. It gains indestructible until end of turn. -2. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. And -6 for the ultimate. You get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on your turn. Create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
So Basri is another planeswalker that's very effective when you're attacking and not great when you're not. The -2, first of all, just explicitly rewards you for attacking when you're like, I'm going to play Basri and attack you with 3 creatures and get 3 tokens. Probably going to win that game. The vigilance on the +1, so you're getting a +1/+1, or sorry, indestructible on the +1 means that you're going to get a good attack in. But again, you're the one who's supposed to be pressing the offense. It does not help you defensively. And then of course the emblem's great, but Basri's not gonna stick around long enough without winning for that to kind of come into play. The power level here is high enough that I would take Basri early and build an aggressive deck if I saw Basri.
Agreed.
I would not put this in a control deck. And even in a mid-range deck, there's going to be times when this requires you to have the board in a situation which is already kind of good for you. So Basri gets a B+, but again, you just really want to be aggressive to take advantage of this.
Yeah, the thing that you're taking advantage of is you have a planeswalker that costs 3 mana, and it comes down and slams you. So agree with everything Luis said there on Basri Ket. Next is Basri's Lieutenant. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4 human knight at rare with vigilance and protection from multicolored. When Bostri's lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And whenever Bostri's lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. Wow, they just stacked this thing up, didn't they?
Yeah, Bostri's lieutenant's actually better than Bostri.
It is.
Because you can put the counter on this. So this is by itself a 4-mana 4/5 Vigilance Pro multicolor, which dies into a 2/2. And it combines nicely when you have counters on other creatures because the last ability just looks for counters. You can obviously put a counter on another creature if you like have a flyer or a lifelinker you want to get going. And the total package you get here is very, very good. So I would give Bostri's Lieutenant an A- and be happy playing this in any white deck.
That's what I was thinking. A- for Bostri's Lieutenant, somehow usurping Bostri Kit. Next is Containment Priest. This is 1 and a white for a 2/2 flash human cleric at rare. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead.
So this is a card which is already legal in Legacy and Vintage because of Commander products, and now is legal in every format. And I think that's awesome. It's a good card for Constructed. It basically fights against nonsense decks. For Limited, this is mostly just a 2-mana 2/2 flash, which is actually fine. Like you'll play the card. It's a good 2-drop. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of extra value because they'll attack a 1/1 into this on turn 2. They play like their utility creature. And then if you happen to play against the Reanimator deck, this is what it hoses. It hoses Rise Again really badly. It just makes it so that card doesn't work. So if I were playing against a deck that had that, I would try to leave this up so they didn't know that it was going to happen. Because what will happen is they cast Rise Again on their Waker of Waves. In response, you flashing Containment Priest. Their spell resolves and just exiles their creature. So they're down a spell, and the creature's now exiled. So they don't even get that later if they're able to deal with Containment Priest. So it's a C, and in some matchups it'll perform as a B, which
C
is
with
a nice bonus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next is Glorious Anthem. This is 1 white for an enchantment. At rare, it says creatures you control get +1/+1. And this card's actually been around for a really long time. It's pretty good. I mean, you need to, I would give this a build around grade in the sense that you do want to make sure that you're fairly creature heavy, but most limited decks will fit that description, especially white ones anyway. But you want to lean your picks towards cards that make an additional creature or put more than one creature on the battlefield for one card to really take advantage. Another deck that really likes cards like this are flying decks, where you can pump up 2 to 3 flyers in the air and shorten your clock by as much as a turn.
Yeah, you also want cheaper creatures because a 2/2 gets relatively more from this than a 6/6.
Right.
So you want to skew cheap. You want to skew wide. You want just to be an aggressive deck. I wouldn't even go so far as to call this a build around because you can put this in any deck that has like 12, 13 creatures or more, and it's going to be good. Mm-hmm. Where it becomes awesome is in like the 18 creature deck that's got a ton of 1 and 2 drops.
Sure.
But
yeah, that's true.
It's just a very powerful card. If you have this in play, the longer the game goes, the more advantageous trades you're just going to end up getting. All your creatures get bumped up a level. They all got a promotion. So now your 2 drops are on par with their 3s and so on. It's going to be hard for them to win a game where that's the case. So it gives aggro decks legs in the late game, which is pretty nice. I would give the Glorious Anthem an A. I just think that the effect this has on the game is just so massive and it's not asking really anything of you besides put creatures in your deck.
Which is what you're going to be doing most of the time anyway. I'm going to give it a B+. I like Glorious Anthem a lot, but there are scenarios where it underperforms, where your opponent kills a bunch of your creatures and you have a Glorious Anthem and it's not pumping anything up or whatever.
Yeah, but how are they killing all your creatures? It's harder to kill them with this in play. Shock can't kill bears anymore.
That's true, but sometimes they just, they have like 2 removal spells. You've played 3 creatures. You play Glorious Anthem, and it's giving one of your creatures +1/+1, and then maybe one later. There are
games where this will not help you very much. I agree with that.
Also, make sure that you play to it. If you just trade off all your early stuff and you're holding a Glorious Anthem in your hand, you're kind of doing it wrong. Next is Idol of Endurance. This is 2 and a white for an artifact. It's rare. When Idol of Endurance enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield. Okay, sure. You can pay 1 and a white and tap it. Until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell from among the cards exiled with Idol of Endurance without paying its mana cost. 3 or less, and you have to pay 2 and tap it to pick one of them to actually do, so you're tacking on an extra 2 mana to the ones that needed to be in the graveyard in the first place. And then you're only getting them.
Mana cost. So
what's that? Oh, you don't pay the cost at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically what this does is, imagine when you cast it, you draw all the creatures from your graveyard with cost 3 or less. Now they all cost 2 mana, but you can only play 1 per turn. Like, it lets you play 1 per turn for 2 mana until you run out.
That's really slow and clunky. I don't really like that.
I think this is an okay build around, because if you're an aggressive deck and then on turn like 5 or 6, you like play this, exile 3 creatures, play 1 immediately, then the next 2 turns you play them. You got a 3-for-1, and you spent 9 mana to get 3 creatures into play that all cost 3 or less. So if they all cost 3, you broke even on mana and are up 2 cards. Obviously, if they're 2 drops, you kind of overpaid. It's an attrition card for a deck that generally attrition is not their primary strategy.
That's my concern. Yeah.
I like this a lot as a sideboard card if you're playing best of 3, when you're playing your white red aggro deck and you play against blue black control and they have like tons of grasps of darkness and stuff like that, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna slide an idol because this will give me a 5-for-1. I can just kind of wait on this as long as possible. But I could also see maybe like a white black like sacrifice deck that has a bunch of Death Spore Thalids and stuff like that, where you're like, trade off, sack for benefit, play idol as my draw 3, draw 4, draw 5. Yeah, this card's powerful. It's hard to get to work. It's going to be really bad against aggressive matchups because you have to stabilize before this starts to get going. I mean, how much do you like a 3-mana artifact that's 2-tap draw a card?
I like that a lot.
Well, in some decks, this card is going to be comparable to that. It runs out after 3 or 4 uses.
I just feel like it's a lot worse than that, though. Because the cards that I'm getting are cards that are likely no longer relevant at the point that I'm actually playing them. And that really concerns me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, now that we're talking through this, where I like this most is in like a white-black deck that has sacrifice elements, because then even late game, you're going to get value from this.
See, I like that. Yeah.
And it has the tools to fill its own graveyard. I think in general, Idol of Endurance is like a build around C/sideboard B, where if the game comes down to attrition, this could be a decent sideboard card. But overall, this card's going to be pretty difficult to get to use. My guess is we'll have a better idea of this after trying it out, because it doesn't look great on its face, but I can see matchups where it's good.
I agree. And it really does depend on what those cards are that you're getting back. If you're getting back vanilla 2/2s, I'm really unimpressed and I wouldn't even want to play it. But if you're getting back tappers or utility creatures or creatures with good enter the battlefield abilities, or maybe even a rare or something along those lines, then I'm more interested. So yeah, build around C for Idol of Endurance. We're going to have to try that one out. Next is Mangara the Diplomat. 3 and a white for a 2/4 lifelink legendary human cleric at Mythic rare. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, that's how it's worded, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, draw a card.
See, this is the kind of text that I rail against.
This is for creatures. This is a multiplayer thing.
I get it.
Is that what it is? Okay, yeah. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. Wow, the only downside to Mangara is that being a 2/4 lifelink means that your opponent is not going to attack you with creatures, because you have a 2/4 lifelink. It's impossible to attack into one of those.
Yeah, Mangara gives your opponent like full control over whether you're going to draw extra cards, and it's fine. Like a 2/4 lifelink is a solid defender. Its ability means they're really not going to be attacking you with multiple creatures if they can help it. And casting 2 spells in a turn, like them cutting off that can hurt some decks, when the ones with cheap spells especially, and can also just annoy your opponents, where it's like, it's turn 7 and I have a 4-drop and a 3-drop. I guess I can only play one of them. You don't have to do that very many times before you kind of got your money back on Mangara. So, and that's kind of assuming your opponent's like under the rules that they will never give you a second card, like a free card, which, sometimes they'll be forced into. Mangara is a solid defensive creature, and
very solid.
it's actually okay in aggressive decks where your opponent's not going to be able to really race you very much. Like imagine this in a blue-white flyers deck where you're like, play this, have 2 flyers just hitting you, and then your opponent's like, wow, I really can't mount a counterattack here. So I would give Mangara a B.
Me too, a B. I love the idea of just attacking with Mangara and then being like, are you going to attack me back and give me a bunch of cards?
Right.
Like,
plus, some amount of opponents will just forget about the text.
Oh, yeah, like, for sure.
I mean, there's going to be people who you're playing them on Arena. Mangara's going to trigger, and there's going to be a pause and you see them hover over Mangara.
Yeah, and then it's going to say, "Oops."
Yep. So I would give Mangara a B, and just a solid card.
B for a Mangara.
9 lives is next. It's a 1 white. It's an enchantment at rare. It has hexproof. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. When it leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So it's kind of like a top down of a cat having 9 lives. It's I think, a very charming design. What it means in terms of gameplay is once you play this, your life total is no longer really relevant, but you can take 9 more hits. The 9th hit kills you. And note, each attacking creature is a separate hit. So if they attack you with 3/1/1s, that's 3 counters on this.
Yeah.
I do not like this card in limited. It's a powerful life gain spell. If you play this when you're at 5, you're getting kind of minimum 8 life because the 9th hit damage kills you, but realistically more than that because a 3/3 still just deals 1 counter. Like now all attackers are kind of equal in terms of how much damage they deal to you. So, again, if you're building up to an Ugin, though I guess the Ugin's -3 is really bad with this in play. If you're building up to a big late game thing or you're racing them with flyers, this could buy you like 3 or 4 turns easily where, they're really going to have a hard time killing you. But a pure life gain spell, 3 mana gain 10 is just not a good card.
Right. That's the problem.
And I think there's going to be enough times where this is just something similar to that. So I would give 9 lives an F, but it has some sideboard applications where you're a blue-white flyers deck or a control deck playing against an aggressive deck, and pure life gain's actually fine.
Yeah, F for 9 lives. Next is Pack Leader. This is 1 and a white for a 2/2 dog at rare. Other dogs you control get +1/+1. Whenever Pack Leader attacks, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn to dogs you control.
I really like Pack Leader. You don't need other dogs for this to be a solid aggressive creature. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that can't take damage when it attacks. Like it looks at itself for that ability. So an aggro deck would definitely play a 2 mana 2/2 that is invulnerable to damage whenever it's attacking. Like that that's a good card. And then if you combine this with an Alpine, Watchdog or any of the dogs in the set, of which there's a couple.
There's a lot actually. There are 6 other dogs in the set, and they're all common except for 2, which are uncommon.
Yeah, Bolt Hound is the uncommon, right? And
Selfless Savior.
Yeah, the 1/1. So Pack Leader is good. I think Pack Leader is a C+. I think that Pack Leader just will deliver some good value to you. It's just by itself good enough. Then that's the important part. Definitely.
So Pack Leader C+, especially for your aggressive deck. Next is another reprint, Ruined Halo, white for an enchantment at rare. As Ruined Halo enters the battlefield, choose a card name. You have protection from the chosen card name, which means you, as the player, can't be targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted by anything with that name.
So Ruined Halo operates as a removal spell for a control deck. Because imagine your opponent plays Colossal Dreadmaw. You're like, Ruined Halo, name Colossal Dreadmaw. Now, that Dreadmaw can no longer deal damage to you. So it effectively can't attack because you just let it through unblocked and it doesn't do anything. It can still block, which is why you want this in either an aggressive deck or a flyers deck, a control deck or a flyers deck. Yeah. You don't want to be attacking on the ground because this curse gets a lot worse. Though even in a flyers deck, if you're forced to Ruin Halo a flyer, it can still block and it be pretty annoying. It also is nice that it hits doubles. Imagine, you name Deathspore Thallid and they have 3 of them in play. It'll protect you from all of them.
Yeah.
And it has some niche stuff like, if they have Volcanic Geyser in their deck and that's their best out, you can Ruined Halo that preemptively and make it so they can't nug you to death with that. That's not that often. Or I guess you could name Mind Rot, though that's pretty sketchy too.
Yeah.
So I think this card's a fine control card because 2 mana to make it so a creature can't attack is pretty good. Also, unlike something like Pacifism, a bounce spell bouncing the creature doesn't save them, Like, this doesn't enchant the creature. This just sits in play. So I think Ruined Halo is kind of like a C for control decks and pretty bad outside of that. It's not a spectacular card.
When it comes to playing it, is it better to wait until they play a thing and then name the thing? Or if it's game 2 or 3 and they have Baneslayer Angel in their deck or whatever, do you just play it and name the thing that you're scared of?
I would usually wait because you first of all, you have the 1 turn window between them playing and attacking with it. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to, and it only costs 2, so you're not saving that much mana to play it earlier. It would just be such a disaster to name Colossal Dreadmaw and they just don't draw it.
They never draw it.
It doesn't do anything.
You
do have to name it preemptively if you're trying to stop Mind Rot or any other spell that targets you, but you're really not going to do that all that often.
Okay, last white card is Speaker of the Heavens. This is white for a 1/1 human cleric at rare. It's got Vigilance and Lifelink, which are nice abilities, but on a 1/1 don't really carry you that much. You can tap it to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. You can activate this ability only if you have at least 7 life more than your starting life total and only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So how do you get your life total to 27? Because if this thing gets activated once, it's already insane and you can just do it every turn. So that's absurd. But even the lifelink on itself is you might get in for 1 or 2 damage with it, but you're not getting in for more than that.
Titanic Growth. Well, bam.
I like that. You're still not there, but I like it.
This is a high payoff, high difficulty build around. It's almost exclusively for white, black, or really any white based heavy life gain deck. But we're talking like you don't just need to revitalize. You need 2 revitalizes and a hit with this. You need to hit them with your 4/3 life linker. You need to, really do some work to gain that life. Once you do, though, you just win the game because if you can tap this once, it's fantastic. Yeah. And once you've activated it multiple times, I don't really see how your opponent's realistically going to kill you. So I would say this is like a build around C just because the difficulty is so high. The payoff is fantastic. I'm definitely going to try this if I see it, but there's going to be a lot of games where you just, first of all, don't even have the cards to get yourself to 27, or you play this and your opponent's like, wow, I really have to prioritize dealing damage. Or, oh, they're at 24 and it looks like they might gain some life. All right, I'll kill their 1/1. I'll shock it,
Yeah, like, degree of difficulty extremely high on this. You're right about that.
This has a tap ability. So it's not like you can even just let this sit in your hand and play it and immediately get the bonus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to give Speaker of the Heavens a build around C, but my guess is it's probably closer to a D just in terms of difficulty.
I just wonder if there's a deck that you actually just want the 1/1 Vigilance lifelink that you can build off of, pump it up, aura it up, something like that. Curve considerations, whatever. But as a build around,
putting Rousing Read on it, right? +1/+1 and flying, like
there you go. Or the demon thing, or even if you have like Basri Ket in your deck or whatever, just some way.
Sure, yeah.
Any of the Glorious Anthem or whatever. Okay, so that's white. We've got a couple of gold cards, a few artifacts, and then a few lands, and we're done. Gold cards. Nyambi Esteemed Speaker is blue-white for a 2/1 legendary human cleric at rare. Nyambi has flash, and when Nyambi Esteemed Speaker enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. Interesting. Also activated ability. 1 blue-white tap. Discard a legendary card. Draw 2 cards.
So Nyambi
that's a tougher one.
Is not really going to use the secondary ability very often. I think that's going to be pretty rare. But a 2-mana 2/1 flash that can save one of your other creatures and even gain a little bit of life. That's pretty good. It kind of reminds me of the deputy, the one white blue flash 2/2 that saves one of your creatures, or white mane lion, any of those cards, and those were all pretty good. And this gaining life alongside of that is just an extra bonus. So imagine they use a removal spell, and you play this and bounce your creature. You 2-for-1 them because you're up a 2/1, and you gain some life. Though I guess you did bounce your own creature, which sets you back a little bit. I would say Nyambi is a C+. Just a good card to put in any blue-white deck.
That's what I think, too. And then if you ever get to activate the tap ability, that's amazing. Yeah, most legendary cards you put in your limited deck are like your best cards. So You won't want to
It's not
cash
going to
them.
happen too often.
No. Next is Rada, Heart of Keld. This is 1 green-red for a 3/3 legendary elf warrior. As long as it's your turn, Rada, Heart of Keld has first strike. So 3/3 first strike for 3 mana as long as it's your turn. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands from the top of your library. Okay, that's really powerful. 4, and then activated ability, 4 red, green. Rada gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. Jeez. Now, there's a lot going on with this card. Seems super powerful to me. 3/3 first strike on the attacks. You can play lands from the top of your library, which is very strong. And then this pump ability is pretty
cool. That's like drawing
cool.
half a card a turn almost.
Right.
It's drawing 40% of a card a turn.
Yeah.
And the pump ability is also outrageous. You're getting at least +6/+6 and probably more.
Right. And on attacks, it's first strike. So there's really chump block or die territory. And on blocks, it's going to eat up anything.
Yeah. Rada looks like an A to me.
Me too.
I mean, you play Rada on turn 3 and she's going to accumulate card advantage while attacking as a 3/3 first striker. And you play her on turn 9 and she's like, oh, I'm attacking as a 10/10.
Right.
You know, good luck.
Right.
So.
And she's generating you card advantage by clearing the top of your library. I mean, it's not in-hand card advantage, but it's, we call it virtual card advantage. That is awesome. Yeah, I like A for Rada, Heart of Keld. Jeez. I honestly didn't expect that card to be that good for the red-green. I expected, it beats down or whatever, but it does a lot more.
No, this card. I mean, I'm expecting this card to see some constructed play as well. It's a Corsair crew fix that with a more aggressive bent, but that's still pretty good.
I like that. Next is Sanctum of All, and this is Wooburg for the cost. It costs blue, white, red, black, green. Yeah, I did it out of order on purpose. Legendary enchantment, Shrine. The super shrine is here. It's rare. It's regular rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. Okay, this is all just LOL, right? Because at the mana cost, you can't put it in your deck, so it's an F. Then on top of it, it's like it's like this win more shrine card that's just completely absurd. If you control 6 or more shrines, like what is going on here? I mean, they're uncommon, but you're not getting 6. So whatever. This card's cool. And for the love of all things, I hope somebody sends us a screenshot of searching up a bunch of shrines with Sanctum of All, but it's an F and you're not putting this card in your deck.
Yeah. I mean, this card is pretty sweet, but I can't realistically endorse playing it, even though obviously at some point I hope to try.
Right, exactly. So dream, but don't put it in your deck if you're trying to win. Next is Chromatic Orrery, which is 7 mana for a legendary mythic rare artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. What does that sentence mean?
So it means that you can cast any color of spells.
Okay.
Like a card that costs black 3 effectively costs 5 for you. Just
right.
5 colorless.
Okay. And speaking of 5 colorless, it taps to add 5 colorless.
Or there we go.
In its case, 5 mana of any color to cast spells. And then you can pay 5 mana and tap it to draw a card for each color among permanents you control. So this is a 7 mana fixing ramp and card draw spell, but it's 7 mana. So
it is 7 mana, but what'll happen, I think, is you're going to go play Orrery and tap it to play your biggest card. Well, something that costs 5 or less, which is pretty big. Mm-hmm. And then next turn, you can use it again to double spell. But then when you're out of spells, you can pay 5 and tap it and draw probably 2 cards unless you have a 3-color plus deck.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not really buying what this is selling. I think that it's too much work because the downside of having a 7-drop just brick in your hand and then needing this plus other things doesn't do anything on its own. You play this, if you don't have another spell to play, you're just saying go. And then next turn you're spending your whole turn to draw a card or 2, maybe 3 if you're really going deep. And then the turn after that you can play more things. That's just too much setup cost. So I think it's a D because I think that there will be like control decks where this is their finisher
The card draw part, yeah.
Like imagine you're like Chromatic Ori, tap 5, play a removal spell on your creature, untap, play 2 more removal spells or whatever, then start slowly using this to draw cards and using it to spend mana on those cards. Like that you can lose to this card. I can envision losing to this card.
Definitely.
I don't think it's a very good card, though. No. I would give it a D.
Yeah, I don't like my ramp cards to cost 7 mana for starters, so that's pretty bad. D for Chromatic Orrery. Next is Maze Mind Tome. This is 2 mana for an artifact at rare. It taps to put a Sage counter on Maze Mind Tome, and you get to scry 1. So 2 mana tap, right away, scry 1. It's pretty cool. And it's just no mana after that. And then you can
Come on, you're never going to tap this to scry.
Okay, 2 mana, tap it, put a page counter on Maze Mind Tome, draw a card. Okay, that's a little better. I like that. When there are 4 or more page counters on Maze Mind Tome, exile it. If you do, you gain 4 life.
So it's a book with 4 chapters, and each chapter is either 2 to draw a card or tap to scry 1. Or 2 tap to draw a card.
Right, so like you said, I want to pay 2 to draw a card. Those are the juicy
And
chapters.
when it goes away, it leaves you 4 life, which kind of makes up for the fact that you spent, something like 6 to 10 mana on this card to draw a bunch of cards, maybe get a scry if there's a turn where, like, I can imagine you played this and it's got 3 counters on it, and you really just want the 4 life, and you have a lot of action in your hand.
Yeah.
Just cashing it into scry 1 and gain 4 life.
Yes.
So I like this card. I think Maze Mind Tome's a B. I think just about any deck that's not really, really aggressive will be happy with it, because the net is gain 4 life, draw 4 cards, even if it's slow. And the fact that you can scry, like imagine you keep a 2-land Maze Mind Tome hand. I'm happy enough scrying to look for my 3rd land.
Totally.
And then maybe drawing a couple cards later. So even aggressive decks, they can play cards like this. This isn't constructed where you can only play aggressive creatures and damaging spells. You can put this in like a white-red aggro deck to gas up and still just beat another deck on cards.
Yeah, so, you can do that. This is like the kind of book you're reading where you don't want it to end, You just...
That's most of the books I read, yeah. I get sad with them. But I would give Maze Mind Tome a B. I think it's quite good.
B for Maze Mind Tome. Next is Solemn Simulacrum. Love this guy. The sad robot, although it looks kind of mean now.
This looks like a badass robot now.
Yeah. 4 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. When Solemn Simulacrum dies, you may draw a card. This is just one of the best value cards ever printed. It's an absolute all-star in limited. This card is absurd in limited. It trades off for some small creature at the expense of them having to watch you draw a card for having done so, and it ramps and fixes you for colorless. It's awesome. I love this card.
Yeah, it's great in any deck. It's at its best in multicolor expensive decks, but any deck is just going to be like, I'm going to play my 3-for-1 that costs 4 colorless mana, and I will be happy doing so. You get a land, you get a card, and you probably traded this for a card. A 2/2's worth a card. So it's not a bomb in the sense that a bad deck with a Solemn is not going to do great things all of a sudden.
Right.
But it's, first of all, it makes your good cards better because it gets you the mana, the time, and the cards to cast them.
Yeah.
And second, it's just a solid, advantageous card by itself. I would give Solemn an A-. I don't think it's quite full on A, but A- sounds right.
It's the ultimate enabler, and that gets an A-. Last artifact is Spark Hunter Masticore, which is 3 mana for a 3/4. So if you've been listening along with us for a lot of set reviews, you're going to go, wait a second, what am I giving up here? Artifact creature Masticore at rare. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. All right, well, there's your answer. It has protection from planeswalkers, not very relevant for us. You can pay a mana and have Spark Hunter Masticore deal 1 damage to target planeswalker, not very relevant for us. And you can pay 3 mana to have Spark Hunter Masticore gain indestructible until end of turn. So to kind of, whittle this down, it's 3 mana, 3/4 with the ability pay 3. It gets indestructible until end of turn, and it is additional cost to cast it. You discard a card in the vast majority of scenarios for limited. That seems fine to me. The additional cost to cast a card is a steep, a very steep cost, no doubt about it.
Yeah, no way to get around it either. You can't play this as like your last card, right? You have to have the card to discard.
Mm-hmm.
A 3-mana 3/4 that is really hard to kill is probably worth discarding a card for. I don't think it's great, but I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. I would give Spark Hunter Masticore a C+.
Me too. That's where I was at. C+ for that card. The lands, there are actually only 3, basically. The first one is Animal Sanctuary, which is a land at rare that makes colorless mana, taps for colorless mana, or you can pay 2 mana and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, goat, ox, or snake.
Look, if I had 3 creatures that fit this category, this card would be very good in my deck. If you have 2, it's okay, and with 1, it's probably not the cost of playing a colorless land. Not worth the cost. But if you have a couple creatures that qualify for this, it can be pretty strong. 2 mana and tapping a land, so 3 mana to put a counter on a creature from a card that just taps for mana normally is fine.
Mm-hmm. So let me look real quick and see what we're looking at as far as cards in the set. So a quick cursory search reveals 17 such cards in the set. Actually, make it 16. One of them's not a real card. Across all the colors.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't seem impossible to end up with a couple in your deck.
Yeah.
I don't think I would draft around this.
No.
But it's certainly a card that's solid to play.
How many do I need? 3? 4? I mean, playing a colorless land is a steep cost, especially if you never get to activate the thing. 4, maybe? I actually don't know. 3?
I think at 3 I would
3
play.
in a 2-color deck. Yeah, it's right on that borderline. Build around in the sense that you need to make sure you have some amount of these type of things, or else it doesn't do anything. I wouldn't give it a high grade, though. I'd still give it like a build around C, just because I don't think that you can like pump these type of things out and just make this tap put a counter on a creature. They can also kill the one snake that you played or whatever, and then this card doesn't do anything anymore. Fabled Passage is in this set. So this is at rare. It's a land that taps to sacrifice it and search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Then if you control 4 or more lands, you untap that land. So this is, an improved Evolving Wilds, but it's at rare. I wouldn't pick it very highly, but I would play it in every deck that I had access to effectively. And, that puts it in like a C.
Yeah. I mean, I think Evolving or Fabled Passage is a C+ just because 2-color decks do need some help with their mana. Mm-hmm. And I would say this is better than the average playable, but it's not a card you really need to prioritize.
And our last card is actually a cycle of 5 cards, and these are the temples. These are the enemy temples, I suppose. So Temple of Epiphany, Temple of Malady, Temple of Mystery, Temple of Silence, and Temple of Triumph. They are all the same template. There is a blue-red, a green-black, a blue-green, a black-white, and a red-white in here. And they all have the same thing of inner battlefield tapped, scry 1 when that happens, and then they tap for one of their colors of mana. These cards are really good. These are very powerful. I would suggest playing these even if you don't need the second color of mana. Just the scry is really good if you draw these later in the game and you can clear away a land off the top, or if you play it on turn 1 and can get yourself to the lands that you need. And then if you're splashing, or if they happen to be in your exact color pair, they go up even further than that. I don't know that I'm willing to put them in the B range, but I would have them in the C+ to B- range, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think B- is about right for temples. I mean, they fix your mana and they give you a scry. That's a pretty big game.
It's a big game for a fairly low cost of entering the battlefield tapped. So there you go. There is your M21 Rare and Mythic Rare set review. This set, as always, is a core set. So, we don't see some of the really weird, ambitious designs here, but certainly some raw power and certainly a lot of sort of core flavor that they like to put into these sets. And, it's going to be sweet to see what ends up popping off, as far as those go. One thing I will say is outside of Ugin, many of the best rares are creatures that don't protect themselves. So at least if you manage your removal wisely, you'll have a chance to beat them, which I really like. I like sets that play out that way. Yeah. I want to remind you, about the CFB Pro Showdown. Signups are until this Friday, so we're recording the show and it'll be up Thursday, so tomorrow. For CFB Pro members, you get 1,000. There's 1,000 total store credit for the prize pool, and the winner gets a chance to play against Reed Duke to try to double their prize if they can get by Reed. So very cool. Make sure you check that out. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV, pretty much everywhere. And you can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. That's the kind of hub we have a bunch of links on the front for all the stuff that we do, as well as every episode of the show is available there for download. I also want to remind you can get the show wherever you like to listen or watch your podcast. We have it on YouTube with a video version where you can see Luis and I, not being distracted the whole time by other stuff.
No, definitely not.
Not at all. And of course, you can find the podcast on LRcast as a direct download. You can find it on any podcast app that you use, Apple, Google Store, all of that kind of stuff. You can get it on Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher. I mentioned YouTube. Basically, my goal is to try to make the show accessible to you wherever you want it. And by the way, if there is a place that you'd like it and it's not there, you can let me know and I can see if I can to get it there. Because the whole model here is that we want this show to come to your ears as effortlessly as possible so that you can get the information you need to crush your local store events or your online events, as it were, right now, or your friends or whoever it is that you happen to be playing against as soon as possible. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week with First Impressions.
So I have a little rant to go on here. I think my current least favorite card in Magic is Arkham's Astrolabe. I've been playing pretty good amount of Legacy and Modern, and let's step away from the gameplay of Astrolabe. I'll get to that. The first thing, and I think actually the potentially most damaging thing about it is, did you know that Arkham's Astrolabe bans non-snow lands in those formats?
It kind of does, doesn't it?
No, it actually does. Let's say, Marshall, you have decided you're going to play, a blue-white deck. Uh-huh. You're deciding, should I use my beta lands? Should I use my APAC lands? Oh, I really like the Arena 96 lands. And these are all lands I love. Mm-hmm. But then you think, wait, if I don't use snow-covered lands, I'm telling my opponent I don't have Astrolabe in my deck. And I'm telling them I don't have Oko or Lore Scale Quaddle or a Splash. Nope, that's an actual leak. I need to go ahead and play snow-covered lands in my non-snow deck. And this is true where you are now taking a non-zero strategic hit if you do not play snow-covered basics in any deck you choose. And I think that's a tragedy, because you know what's great about Magic? One of the things that's great is there's a lot of beautiful basic land art.
Yes. And
you know what's also cool? People like customizing it. Yes. People like choosing which basics they play. They like choosing what sleeves they play. They like choosing, what playmat they play. Imagine if there was a card which said, if you have black sleeves, draw an extra card. Well, everyone would just have to use black sleeves, or they'd be giving away the information that they're not playing that card. And Astrolabe actually does that. And I think that damages the landscape of Magic in multiple ways. It takes away the customization and good feelings that you have when you put these cards in your deck. It also means you always see the same lands. You only see two different lands. You either see the snow-covered lands that they printed recently in Modern Horizons. You see the ones they printed in Cold Snap, or you see the ones they printed in Ice Age. But that's just three arts. And it's just very monotonous. So
that's awful.
That I think it's a huge hit. I think it's a very real one. The other thing is the card is also just way too good. Like Arkham's Astrolabe means in Legacy, people are playing back to basics and Blood Moon in their 4-color Uro, Swords to Plowshares, Baleful Strix decks.
God, really?
Seriously, you get to play 4-color control decks that punish people for playing non-basics. It also makes Wasteland a lot worse, which you can argue, I think it's valid to say, hey, Wasteland sucks. I don't like playing against Wasteland. That's fine. But it really does take a lot away from aggro decks in Legacy, and Wasteland's one of their more powerful balancing tools. So I think that Astrolabe really is not only too good, I think it also just takes away a lot of the fun that Magic has in it. And I would love nothing more than to see a ban of Arkham's Astrolabe for, a variety of reasons.
You've convinced me.